Chapter 828. The mystery of fate lay in the fact that no one could predict what would happen in the future. Even Lu Guandao's stargazing and the Buddhist sect's destiny could not see through the mysteries of the heavens. Just like Wang Chongyang, the founder of the Quanzhen sect in the northern Song dynasty, who had passed the Jinshi examination and then the Wujinshi examination. He could be said to be a great talent who excelled in both the pen and the sword. He thought that he was going to show off his skills, but the corrupt officialdom at that time made him powerless and powerless. He could only angrily hang up his crown and become a chivalrous hero, looking for people to fight and PK. He was hated by the locals as Wang Baofeng. But who would know that it was this Wang Baofeng who met an immortal at the age of 48 and began to cultivate. 2 years later he built the Tomb of the Living Dead and concentrated on his cultivation. 3 years later he reached the pinnacle of cultivation. 7 years later he went to Shandong to preach and founded the world-famous Quanzhen sect. He then became a famous figure in the Chinese cultivation world and even in Chinese history. Coincidentally, when Li Yundong was also given the good guy card by one girl after another on campus, who would have known that this crazy loser would one day become a top master who would shock China and Japan? Who would have guessed what kind of realm he would reach in the future and what kind of career he would achieve? No one knew. The mysteries of heaven were mysterious and unfathomable by mortals. It was also because of this that John, an American man who had changed his name to Li Sen and was extremely devout in the art of Chinese cultivation, did not know that he had accidentally tripped and actually caused a fatal disaster. Zhang Lufang also didn't know that on a whim, she had brought her big-nosed junior brother here for a curious trip. The result was that she had stirred up a monstrous disaster for herself, and was almost expelled from the sect. Similarly, Zhang Tianhe, whose emotions had changed drastically, did not know that he had lent Li Sun the 7-star sword to play with for a while. Especially when he saw Li Sun playing with it when he came out of the stone, he hesitated a little and did not take the sword with him. In the future he had provoked the Jingyi sect and almost destroyed it. When Zhang Lufang ran out of the stone with her big-nosed junior brother, Zhang Tianhe and the others had no idea that there was a flaw in the formation in the stone. They raised their heads and looked at the thick dark clouds in the sky. Each of them had different expressions. Some looked excited, some were full of curiosity, and some had solemn eyes. Li Sun didn't know why they were like this, so he also looked up at the sky curiously. Zhang Lufang couldn't help but ask, "Senior brothers, is someone crossing the lightning tribulation? Which perfected master is going through the thunder tribulation? Is he from our Jingyi school?" Zhang Lufang kept asking, but the two young Taoist priests didn't have time to answer her. They were focused on looking at the clouds. Only Zhang Tianhe lowered his head and smiled patiently. "Junior apprentice sister, your master is undergoing his thunder tribulation." Zhang Liufang's eyes widened in surprise. Has he started his lightning tribulation? Zhang Tianhe smiled slightly and said, "Yes, it's time for the awakening sting. Every minute and second is worth 1,000 gold. Your master has already cultivated to the golden body realm. I hope he can successfully pass the thunder tribulation this time." As soon as he finished speaking, everyone suddenly saw a golden light rushing up from the main peak of the Jingyi sect. This golden light went straight to the sky and instantly disappeared into the thunder clouds. After a while, the thunder clouds were filled with lightning and thunder, shaking heaven and earth. Zhang Lufang couldn't help exclaiming, "Oh, is that the sect master?" Zhang Tianhe couldn't help but look a little nervous. "Yes, it's the Taoist master." Zhang Lufang clenched her fists and looked nervously at the thick dark clouds rolling in the sky. She couldn't wait to rush into the clouds and see how this top master was going through the thunder tribulation. While she was nervous, Zhang Tianhe said to her, "Junior apprentice sister, I want to meditate for a while. If you don't have anything else to do, can you protect me?" Zhang Lufang rolled her eyes. She knew that Zhang Tianhe was being polite and didn't want to drive her away, so he took a roundabout way. She smiled and said, "Okay, when you're done with the thunder tribulation, can you help protect me?" Zhang Tianhe smiled and said, "Okay." After that, he turned his head and reached out to Li Sen, saying with a smile, "Jinren Li Sen, can you return my 7-star sword?" Li Sun seemed to have woken up from a dream and reluctantly returned the 7-star sword. Zhang Tianhe didn't move much, but he pointed his finger at the 7-star sword. The sword immediately seemed to come to life and drilled into his back. Zhang Lufang watched Zhang Tianhe turn around and enter the stone room. She couldn't help but sigh to herself, "Alas, when can I also go through the thunder tribulation?" As she said this, she looked up at the sky and sighed, "I wonder how many people can successfully reach the thunder tribulation stage this time." As she spoke, she suddenly thought of Li Yundong. She thought to herself, "Invincible Li. He should be going through the thunder tribulation now, right? Can he get through it smoothly? Boom. Another bolt of lightning flashed across the sky. With a loud crack, it was as if the sky was about to collapse. Everyone in Tianan City couldn't help but cover their ears, their hearts beating fast. At this time, Li Yundong was sitting cross-legged in the living room. All the electrical appliances and furniture in the room had been moved away, leaving only the cushion under his feet. The surroundings were open, and the windows of the living room and dining room were all open to let air circulate. The strong thunderstorm wind made the curtains rustle. In addition to Li Yundong, the living room was surrounded by people. Su Chan, Ziyuan, Zhou Qin, Lin Miao, and the little foxes of the Fox Zen sect were all looking at Li Yundong nervously. They all knew that this was the most important moment in Li Yundong's life. At this time, Li Yundong's eyes were closed, and he gradually fell into the deepest meditation. After a while, the yin and yang qi in his two kidneys flowed, and the yang spirit condensed little by little, forming a jinshin. Everyone saw Li Yundong's figure shake violently, and in an instant, a slightly golden Li Yundong came out of his body. It was his jinshin yang spirit. Li Yundong smiled and nodded at Su Chan and the others, who were worried and nervous around him. After a slight smile, his figure flashed, and in an instant he split into countless clones, then scattered through the two windows of the hall. Then he rushed straight into the sky and instantly drilled into the thunderclouds. The waking sting in the middle of the sky was not the time when the heavenly thunder was the most powerful, but it was the time when the heavenly thunder was the most alive. It was also the time when God was the most sensitive. At this time, if a cultivator drilled into the sky with the body of the yang spirit, it would be like a thief swaying in front of the police station and shouting arrogantly, "Come and catch me." Therefore, as long as a cultivator flew into the thunderclouds with the yang spirit, he would immediately attract countless heavenly thunder. As soon as Li Yundong drilled into the thunderclouds, he suddenly felt a huge force enveloping him. It was so dark that he could hardly see his fingers. Looking up, he saw a huge vortex spinning in the thunderclouds above his head. The lightning in the vortex was increasing and thunder was bursting. It was as if God was accumulating the power of anger and would instantly blast him into powder. At this time, the pressure brought to him by the heavenly thunder was far greater than when he had faced the heavenly tribulation before. Because the heavenly tribulation at this time was because the strength of a cultivator had reached an amazing level, he began to want to go against the heaven and challenge the power and majesty of God. This was definitely not something that the power of heaven could tolerate, so the power that erupted was far greater than before. Li Yundong only felt that he could hardly move. An extremely strong force in the sky firmly locked him. Even if he escaped from the thunderclouds at this time, he would still be struck by the heavenly thunder. Li Yundong saw that the vortex above his head was spinning faster and faster, and the lightning was getting denser and denser. He knew that this was the most critical moment of life and death. If he didn't go all out, he would definitely be struck into powder and never be reincarnated. There seemed to be a pair of indifferent and contemptuous eyes staring at him in the sky. The earth-shaking thunder seemed to be saying, "Who are you? How dare you challenge the power of heaven?" At this time, Li Yundong only felt that his blood was boiling, and the speed of the jinqi flowing all over his body suddenly increased. He pinched a Mahamudra with both hands and opened his eyes angrily. With a loud bang, he made a Mahamudra and blasted it toward the vortex in the thunderclouds. He shouted, "All methods return to the origin, man conquers heaven." When ordinary Jinshin masters underwent the heavenly tribulation, they were really trembling, cautious, and extremely nervous. They were in a purely defensive posture, for fear that they would waste a little bit of jinqi. However, Li Yundong took the initiative to provoke the heavenly tribulation. He regarded it as a battle with God. He thought that such a battle was very important. He had to have a firm and unwavering heart to win, otherwise the chance of winning was very small. If that was not the case, why were so many Jinshin masters still in the Jinshin realm and not the heavenly tribulation? When Li Yundong's Mahamudra first shot out, it was really shining with golden light like a missile, looking extremely huge and powerful. But after flying for a while, the Mahamudra became smaller and smaller. Especially when it flew to the center of the vortex, it had become like a small shining golden star in the distant sky, which was almost difficult to see with the naked eye. Then, the Mahamudra was completely swallowed by the vortex of thunderclouds, like a stone ox sinking into the sea. There was no movement at all, only the sound of thunder was still there, as if it was laughing at mortals for overestimating themselves. Li Yundong's heart trembled. The silence and vastness of the sky made him feel an incomparably huge pressure coming from all directions. But he was a person who was stronger than the enemy, the stronger he would be. He quickly pinched a series of Mahamudra and recited the mantra. The Mahamudra, like a machine gun, shot out continuously. At this time, if someone was in this huge thundercloud, they would see a golden giant in the thundercloud blasting Mahamudra into the sky like a storm. These Mahamudra were like a series of missiles, endless like a golden silk thread flying straight into the sky. When this series of Mahamudra blasted into the vortex of thunderclouds, they were all swallowed by the rolling dark clouds without exception. At most there was a burst of lightning, but there was nothing unusual. When Li Yundong's last Mahamudra blasted out, the sky finally moved. There was a terrible light in the vortex, becoming more and more dazzling and scorching. Li Yundong's heart trembled and he shouted, "Come on!" He immediately pinched his fingers and pinched out the mighty Akalanatha Mudra, which could not be moved by the wind. At this time, there was a huge crack in the sky as if an atomic bomb had exploded. The earth was shaking violently. In an instant, countless thunderbolts in the thundercloud fell in the blink of an eye, densely covering all directions, making it impossible for people to escape. The dazzling thunder and lightning lit up the dark world, making people blind. Li Yundong's Vajra body was instantly swallowed by these countless thunderbolts and smashed into pieces in the blink of an eye. Chapter 829. The power of heavenly thunder was unstoppable. In the past, the mystical silver fox, with her peerless power, was also afraid of the nine-heaven divine night thunder. What's more, Li Yundong was only in the Jinshin phase, and he had provoked the power of heaven before. At this time, the power of heavenly thunder that broke out was really unprecedentedly terrifying. Li Yundong's Vajra body was instantly smashed into countless pieces, and hundreds of millions of clones instantly spread in all directions in the clouds. At this time, if a cultivator who had not comprehended the infinite void realm and had not comprehended the 10,000 methods returning to the origin was like this, it meant that this cultivator's lifetime of cultivation had been in vain. This person's yang spirit had been completely smashed by heavenly thunder and could no longer be restored. His spirit had been destroyed, leaving only his body, and he had become a vegetable. However, Li Yundong had already comprehended the highest realm of cultivation of Buddhism and Taoism. At the moment when he was struck by the heavenly thunder, he cast his mark of the true method on Su Chan, who was watching him nervously. This imprint was like a coordinate. As long as this imprint remained, no matter how much Li Yundong's yang spirit Jinshin was smashed or how far away he was, he could rely on this imprint to gather and reassemble his yang spirit. Li Yundong's yang spirit was split into countless pieces and scattered in the clouds of thunder and lightning, like countless fireflies floating in the air. At first, these fireflies were still floating in the air, but slowly they began to slowly fly to the ground. If there was a high-power camera to take pictures at this time, it could be clearly seen that when each clone moved, it would attract and pull the dense spiritual qi in the thunderclouds. The reason why cultivators could constantly strengthen themselves during the thunder tribulation was that they relied on the moment they were smashed to crazily absorb the power of heaven left after the heavenly thunder. In other words, the thunder tribulation was a process of destruction and continuous reconstruction. Jinshin being smashed was a serious injury for cultivators. If cultivators did not absorb enough power of heaven in the process of gathering and rebuilding, they would suffer a loss during the thunder tribulation this time. Not only would their cultivation not increase, but it would also decline. This was also why many cultivators who had reached the Jinshin phase would not improve their cultivation when they encountered the thunder tribulation period. Some cultivators had even gone through the thunder tribulation for more than 10 years, but they still could not improve at all. On the contrary, the more they went through, the more courageous they became, for fear that even their current cultivation would be reduced. Li Yundong was like a newborn calf that was not afraid of tigers. He was provoked by the heavenly thunder, which was much more powerful than usual. It struck him into pieces. However, the more powerful the heavenly thunder was, the stronger the spiritual qi it emitted, and the more power Li Yundong could absorb from it. Li Yundong's billions of clones kept flying out of the thunderclouds, and then flew toward his home in Tianan City. Everyone saw countless visible yellow dots fly into the house, and then quickly gather in front of Su Chan. After a while, Li Yundong's appearance reappeared. Su Chan, Ziyuan, Zhou Qin, and the others all looked at Li Yundong nervously, wanting to see whether he had lost or gained in this heavenly thunder. But when they saw Li Yundong's yang spirit body open his eyes, they were bright and clear, and he did not seem to be injured at all. They immediately felt relieved. At least Li Yundong was not injured, which meant that he had not lost anything just now. The little foxes cheered one by one. If it weren't for the fact that Chao Yi and the others had already been trained, they would have pounced on him long ago. After Li Yundong opened his eyes, he let out a long breath and said with a smile, "What a powerful heavenly thunder. If I hadn't comprehended the true method and true self, I'm afraid this heavenly thunder would have killed me." Su Chan looked at Li Yundong enviously. She waved her fist and cheered him on. "Come on, try to survive the thunder retribution today." Li Yundong reached out with a smile and stroked her head. "Well, don't worry." As he spoke, he nodded to Ziyuan and Zhou Qin, who were looking at him with concern on their faces. Then, his figure flashed and he quickly flew into the thunderclouds. After a while, thunder exploded in the sky again, and a bolt of heavenly thunder almost shattered the glass windows in the living room. Before long, Li Yundong's clone quickly appeared in the living room again. This time, the speed at which it condensed was much faster than the last time. As soon as Li Yundong took shape, he quickly flew into the sky again. Everyone saw him come and go more than 10 times, and each time he did it faster than the last. The Jinshinyang spirit that he condensed was more dazzling than the last time. Zhou Qin's heart was burning with passion. She wished she could also be in the thunder retribution and have a taste of it. Ziyuan sighed in her heart. She knew that many Jinshin masters were trembling with fear when facing the thunder retribution. They were so timid that they were struck by the heavenly thunder and could not make ends meet. In the end, their morale was greatly reduced and they became Jinshin masters for the rest of their lives. They saw that Li Yundong was passing through the thunder retribution easily, but in fact, as an inner disciple, she knew very well that the thunder retribution could be said to be a process of suicide and resurrection. This process was extremely painful and ordinary people could not bear it. Just think about it, if you wanted to be struck into powder by the heavenly thunder, then slowly reassemble and then be smashed apart again. This was really a painful thing that made people hover between life and death. Just thinking about it was frightening. What if he was split apart by the heavenly thunder and couldn't gather again? What if he failed during the thunder retribution? But Li Yundong didn't have such a thought. First, he never thought about these things. Moving forward bravely was his style. Everyone watched Li Yundong being smashed by the heavenly thunder again and then reassembling again and again. He was like an army that had been defeated repeatedly on the battlefield. He was defeated again and again, but he fought again and again, indomitable and unyielding. Time passed by slowly and it was already night time. The power of the heavenly thunder also gradually weakened from the earth-shattering power at the beginning. It was as if the heavens, who had been angry for a whole day, was slowly losing its strength. The reason why the heavenly might was terrible was that its power was like the vast sea, unfathomable, and also like the vast sky, continuous and endless. However, Li Yundong had actually held on until even the heavenly might could not withstand it, which was really incredible. When Li Yundong condensed the Jinshin spirit for the last time, everyone also clearly noticed that although the power of Li Yundong's yang spirit had increased unprecedentedly, after Li Yundong woke up from meditation, he couldn't help but feel tired. His Jinshi and spiritual energy were almost exhausted by the endless heavenly thunder. Li Yundong only felt that he was dying of exhaustion. He could only reluctantly nod to Su Chan, Ziyuan, and the others to say hello. After struggling back to his room, he tilted his head and fell asleep on the bed. As soon as he fell asleep, the originally dry and exhausted internal organs in his body got a rest and began to slowly become moist again. His body had reached the highest realm of cultivators, and it could be called a perfect body. His internal organs were even more unbelievably strong. Therefore, as soon as he fell asleep, the meridians and organs in his body immediately repaired and recovered at an amazing speed. After only 1 or 2 hours, Li Yundong had recovered. After Li Yundong got up and opened the door, he saw that the house was extremely quiet. The room was also dark and empty, in sharp contrast to the living room that was full of people just now. At this time, everyone thought that Li Yundong would not go through the thunder retribution today, so they all went back to their rooms at this time. At this time, everyone also went into meditation, no longer watching how Li Yundong would go through the thunder retribution. During the period of waking up, every minute and second was valuable. At this time, cultivating in meditation was also twice the result with half the effort. At a glance, Li Yundong saw that no one was around to protect him, so he hesitated. When a cultivator was going through the thunder retribution, his body must be protected by someone. Otherwise, if a powerless person poked him with a knife, even a golden immortal expert would be killed. Cultivators could cultivate the yang spirit to be indestructible or even invulnerable, but it was impossible to cultivate the body to be invulnerable. Li Yundong hesitated for a while, but then he heard a faint sound of thunder coming from the sky. It seemed that God was provoking him to continue the battle that had not been decided before. Li Yundong raised his eyebrows and immediately took out his personal powerful magical weapon, letting it help protect him around. He sat cross-legged and once again, the Jin Xinyang spirit soared into the sky and went straight into the thunderclouds. After a while, there was a loud rumble of thunder in the sky, as if a giant was roaring angrily. When Li Yundong didn't know how many times he had gathered the Jin Xinyang spirit again, he suddenly felt that there was a faint power of thunder in his yang spirit. This suddenly shocked him and then he was ecstatic. The process of going through the thunder retribution again and again had finally made a qualitative change in him. From the Jinshin to the thunder retribution, there was not such a huge gap as between the yang spirit and the Jinshin. Once a cultivator completed the transformation from the yang spirit to the Jinshin, even a blind man could see the change in the yang spirit. However, after the Jinshin completed the transformation to the thunder retribution, there was not much difference in the appearance. Only he could feel the difference. In terms of power, breaking through from the Jinshin to the thunder retribution meant that the cultivator had successfully absorbed enough power from the power of heaven. Their Jinchi and spiritual energy had the power of heavenly thunder. From then on, they no longer needed to chant incantations to cast any heavenly thunder magic. They could summon it and send it away at will. Moreover, their yang spirit was more powerful, and their spiritual energy was more profound. They were masters who had been tempered by the power of heavenly thunder. Their explosive power and durability would far exceed that of ordinary Jinshin masters. When Li Yundong's yang spirit was once again in the thunderclouds, he looked down at the crisscrossing lightning around him and the vast land under his feet. At this moment, he felt an unprecedentedly powerful force filling his surroundings. He knew that he had successfully broken through to the thunder retribution realm. That night, the thunder resounded through the whole night. Many people in Tianan City were shocked by the amazing thunder and couldn't sleep all night. They didn't know that this city was about to give birth to the youngest thunder retribution master in the history of the Chinese cultivation world. They thought that a terrible storm was about to come with the terrible rolling thunder. As a matter of fact, their guess was not wrong. After the night of thunder ended, a raging storm immediately swept across the land. Sorry, I couldn't stand it in the middle of the second update yesterday, so I went to sleep. I got up early today and finished the update. Chapter 830. After Li Yundong's thunder tribulation yang spirit returned to his body, he let out a long breath. When he opened his eyes again, he was surprised to find a girl lying in front of him not far away. The girl's graceful body was curled up into a ball. Her exquisite figure was curled up, and her black hair was scattered, but it could not hide her delicate and beautiful face. This girl was none other than Su Chan. When Li Yundong saw the little girl's sleeping posture, he immediately remembered that when she had first appeared by his side, she had also looked like this. Li Yundong couldn't help but laugh, then he walked over and gently picked up the little girl. Su Chan was sleeping soundly. When she felt someone holding her, she opened her eyes and took a look. When she saw that it was Li Yundong, she said, "Yundong, have you finished the thunder tribulation?" Li Yundong said softly, "Silly girl, why are you here?" Su Chan rolled her eyes and murmured, "I'm here to protect you. I heard that you got up again, so I came to protect you. Sister Ziyuan and Sister Zhou Qin are all in meditation. They are not free, so I came." Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. He pinched the tip of the little girl's nose and said, "Is this how you protect me? Sleeping soundly on the side?" Su Chan was a little embarrassed. She snuggled into Li Yundong's arms and said in a sweet voice, "I'm so sleepy. This weather is so sleepy." The weather was extremely humid during the rainy season. This kind of humidity was even more obvious for a person like Su Chan, who was born with a strong yin aura. It could slow down the flow of qi and blood in her body and make it stagnant. Since ancient times, many Chinese poems have depicted beautiful women in this rainy season, indolent and inexhaustible, rolling up bead curtains, delicate and powerless. The reason for this is because the more beautiful a woman is, the more lustful she is, and the more lustful a woman is, the more likely she is to be sullen and short of breath, listless and drowsy in the rainy season of spring. When ordinary women are tired and want to sleep, they can just be dismissed as lazy women. But when beautiful women, especially beautiful women, show a lazy posture after sleeping, they really have a soft and beautiful feeling like a begonia sleeping in the spring, and being supported by a man who is weak and delicate. Li Yundong saw that Su Chan's face was still full of sleep, but she forced herself to talk to him. He couldn't help but say lovingly, "If you're sleepy, go back to your room to sleep." At this time the little girl also slowly became more awake. She arched her head in Li Yundong's arms, looked up and smiled. "I'm fine, I'm not sleepy anymore. You continue to go through the thunder tribulation. I'll protect you. I'm sorry just now you found me sleeping secretly. Li Yundong laughed and said, I've already finished. Don't be silly, go back to sleep quickly. Su Chan was stunned for a moment, then overjoyed. She couldn't help but want to exclaim loudly, but then she remembered that Zhou Qin, Ziyuan, and the others were all cultivating in their respective rooms. If she shouted at this time she would definitely disturb them. Su Chan immediately lowered her voice and said with excitement and joy, Yundong, have you passed the thunder tribulation? Li Yundong smiled and said, not completely. I just crossed the first thunder retribution and entered the thunder retribution realm. I'll try to cross the second thunder retribution tomorrow. Su Chan put her arms around Li Yundong's waist happily and said with a smile, well, you're amazing. You reached the thunder retribution realm in just one day. I know that many people in the cultivation world have been undergoing thunder retribution for a long time before breaking through. Li Yundong looked at the little girl playfully and said with a smile, of course. Don't you see who is guarding me? How can I not be fast? Su Chan knew that Li Yundong was making fun of her. She pulled a face at Li Yundong in embarrassment. I didn't do it on purpose, she said. I promise I won't be sleepy again tomorrow. Li Yundong knew that the little girl loved to sleep, and when she was sleepy, nothing could stop her from falling asleep. He smiled and said, well, I'm just teasing you. Now go back to sleep. It's so comfortable to sleep on the bed. Su Chan rolled her eyes and refused to let go of him. I want to sleep with you, she said, refusing to let go of him. These days the two of them had been spending almost every night together. Li Yundong had also become accustomed to the little girl sleeping beside him every night. He chuckled, picked up the little girl and walked towards his bedroom. After entering the room, the little girl rolled down from Li Yundong's arms and rolled on the bed. She giggled and said, it's more comfortable to sleep here. As she spoke, she rolled around on the bed with a pillow in her arms. After a while the bed was wrinkled. Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. Hey, how old are you? Why are you still rolling on the bed? After all, you are a seven-tailed fox spirit, which is equivalent to a cultivator at the top phase of the Yang spirit realm. You are only one step away from the Jinshin realm. Who would believe that you look like this? Li Yundong was just making fun of her casually. The speaker didn't mean it, but the listener took it seriously. The little girl sat up with a pillow in her arms. She knelt beside the bed and stopped moving. She said with a bitter face, Sister Ziyuan and Sister Zhou Qin are now masters of the Jinshin realm, but I'm still in the Yang spirit realm. I'm still in the Yangshin phase. If I hadn't absorbed the Diuan Jindan, I would still be a three-tailed fox spirit. Cultivation had always been a sore point for Su Chan. The little girl was young and her willpower was shallow. With Li Yundong in her heart, she had been unable to concentrate on cultivation. Although she had studied hard for a while, it was just a last-minute practice after all. It couldn't make her have a fundamental change. At the moment she was watching Ziyuan and Zhou Qin go through the thunder tribulation, but as the closest person to Li Yundong she could only watch helplessly. No matter how insensitive she was, her heart was full of discomfort. Seeing her looking at him pitifully, Li Yundong smiled and said, if you had worked as hard as they did, I'm afraid you would have been an eight-tailed fox long ago. Maybe they would have been the ones envious of you. Su Chan pouted and said unhappily, you're so annoying. You have to compensate me. It's all your fault. As soon as I was in meditation, you came to disturb me. You made my cultivation stagnate. Li Yundong asked curiously, how did I disturb you? I'm not around most of the time when you are in meditation. Su Chan made a face at Li Yundong and said, of course not. As soon as I was in meditation, you ran into my heart and mind, making me unable to feel at ease. Tell me, don't you hate me? Why do I only care about liking you? Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. He held the little girl in his arms and coaxed her as if she were a child. Well, I'm sorry, little girl. Don't be angry. I'll make it up to you, okay? The little girl giggled, her eyes rolling, and said, how do you want to compensate me? Li Yundong saw that the little girl was born to be charming. There were countless romantic feelings in her eyes, and the corners of her mouth were always full of charm. In particular, when the little girl's eyes moved, she looked at him affectionately. The seductive eyes at the corners of her eyes were really very attractive, and it made people want to have sex. But the most irresistible thing was that Su Chan had no intention of seduction, so the corners of her eyes and mouth were full of seduction. Her whole body was full of charm, but her eyes were full of purity and innocence, without the slightest emotion. This charming and lovely person had such a look in her eyes. This was really a kind of fatal poison. Even Lu Xiaohui couldn't control himself. He clearly knew that this was a strong poison, but he still wanted to drink it in one gulp for the sake of pleasure. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He held the little girl in his arms, kissed her lips and said with a smile, "You have to pay your debt, okay? I'll devote myself to you. Is that okay?" Su-chan also giggled. Her little tongue gently licked the corner of her pink and tender lips, and she giggled and said, "No, it seems that I'm the one who is at a disadvantage." If Li Yundong had not cultivated to a high level, this little girl was indeed the biggest poison in the world. As the saying goes, sex is like a bone scraper. Although one sexual encounter was not enough to make a person weak, or from prosperity to decline, it was not enough. But when it comes to women, the scariest thing is when the man is unaware, bit by bit, the most precious thing on a man's body. The first sentence of Jin Ping Mate quoted a poem written by Lu Dongbin. The body of a beautiful woman in her 20s is soft, and the sword at the waist beheads the fool. Obviously no head falls, but secretly the bones of the monarch are dry. This sentence showed the harm of beauty to people. Su-chan was about 16 years old, which was the beautiful age of the body of a beautiful woman in her 20s is soft. Looking at her soft and slender waist, Li Yundong really felt that there was a sharp sword hidden in it. If it had been another man, he might have cut off a big head without making a sound. But Li Yundong was not an ordinary man after all. He had already cultivated to the Jinshin phase. The strength of his Niden, the stability of his Qi, and the stability of his Jinshi were rare at that time. Perhaps only the mystical silver fox with the mystical destiny who had recovered her full strength could compare with him. If he had sex with Su-chan, he would not be worried about Li Yundong, but Su-chan would be worried that Li Yundong would take away her Yuanin. Hearing what the little girl said, Li Yundong smiled and whispered in her ear, "Don't worry, I will be very gentle. I won't let you suffer." Su-chan only felt that he was speaking in her ear, and a gust of hot air blew over, making her ears soft and itchy. Her heart was warm and her belly was also hot. She felt weaker and weaker all over. She knew that her master was in love at this time and wanted to have sex with her. The little girl also felt warm in her heart. She raised her eyes and looked at Li Yundong, only to see that he was staring at her, his eyes full of tenderness and love. She suddenly thought of the little things she had been with Li Yundong, of his love and single-mindedness for her, and of the joys and sorrows she had experienced with him. She couldn't help but be extremely moved. She thought to herself, "Yundong is so good to me. If he wants me, then I will give it to him." Thinking of this, the little girl's body was hot all over. With a moan, she raised her head and took the initiative to kiss Li Yundong, entangling with his tongue. The little girl is going to be pushed down. Chapter 831. The two of them kissed for a long time before their lips parted. Li Yundong couldn't help but laugh when he saw that there was still a trace of crystal at the corner of the girl's mouth. He reached out and wiped the corner of the girl's mouth with a smile. At this time the girl was extremely shy. Seeing Li Yundong laugh, she thought that he was laughing at her, so she plunged into Li Yundong's arms and said angrily, "You're so annoying. You're laughing at me?" As soon as she lowered her head, she saw that Li Yundong had set up a small tent, which was very high. She pouted and reached out to grab it. "That's what you get for laughing at me." At this time, Li Yundong's abdomen was really as hard as a Vajra pestle. He only felt that there was an invulnerable golden body in front of him, and he was afraid that it would be smashed by his pestle. Being touched by the little girl's soft and slender hand, Li Yundong suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. Like a raging flame meeting oil, it burned more and more vigorously. Seeing Li Yundong raise his head and take a deep breath, the girl couldn't help but laugh and say with great pride, "Hee hee, let's see if you can still laugh at me." After taking a deep breath, Li Yundong pretended to be angry and glared at her. "Little girl, you're naughty. You're happy to see me in pain." Su-chan's eyes sparkled and she giggled. She flipped her hair behind her ear and gave him a playful and charming wink. Then she lowered her head and went back to sleep. Even though Li Yundong had the strength of King Kong, he couldn't help but tremble. Countless thunderbolts seemed to explode in his mind, and the billions of cells in his body seemed to be shouting with joy. The little girl loved her lover to the extreme. In order to please him, she did not hesitate to use a lot of romantic means. Li Yundong saw that she was busy, and her little head was like a chicken pecking rice. He couldn't help but pull her up and said with a smile, "Well, don't be busy. Today I'm making it up to you." The little girl saw that Li Yunyang was like a 9-patterned coiling dragon pillar. Not only did it soar into the sky, but it also had blue veins protruding from its surface. It looked extremely terrifying. She couldn't help but be frightened and secretly feel timid. She secretly glanced at the thing and said with fear on her face, "Master, I'm a little scared. I'll help you out, okay?" He had read countless Japanese blockbusters. It could be said that he had already cultivated to the realm of reading all the AV movies in the world. His eyes were filled with code, and his heart was filled with desire. As the saying goes, if you are familiar with 300 Tang poems, you won't know how to write obscene poems. Ahem, even if you don't know how to recite poems, you can still recite poems. He had read a lot of them in his daily life, so when he really went to the battlefield he was naturally skilled. Since ancient times, men and women were the same. When a man's sperm went to the brain, his qi and blood would boil, and the qi of the liver and kidney would intersect, causing the qi of the lower dantian in the lower abdomen to break through the huagai acupoint and go straight to the shinting acupoint in the brain. This would cause the qi of the upper dantian in the brain to be chaotic, and his IQ would be terrifyingly low. Sometimes, for the sake of lust, men would even do all kinds of stupid things. Killing and arson were not a problem. This was the reason why people were so bold. In the same way, when a woman was aroused by lust, she would also have such a performance. Since ancient times, how many women who couldn't keep their loneliness colluded with outsiders and turned around to harm their original partners? Wasn't it all for the sake of being together with her lover, so that the two of them could be together for a long time and be happy in the future? Li Yundong smiled slightly, held the little girl's face, looked at her gently and said softly, "Chaner, I'm here." Su Chan looked at Li Yundong with blurred eyes and nodded gently. Although Li Yundong's cultivation was far higher than Su Chan's, Su Chan was, after all, a demon fox, and the fox was the most mean in the world. It was born to attract and even restrain men. Chapter 833. Although the process was a little thrilling, Su Chan successfully completed the transformation from a girl to a woman. At this moment her unique charm and enchanting vixen were fully revealed. Even if Li Yundong was a bronze Vajra or an iron Luohan, he would still become soft in front of this peerless enchanting woman. Even a living Buddha with strong willpower would not be able to withstand it. What's more, Li Yundong and Su Chan were in love with each other. Although they had just finished the battle, after the exchange of their yin and yang qi, they had both benefited. The Jin qi in their bodies was boiling, and it was even stronger than before. Although Li Yundong had opened his qi and handed over his virgin yuan yang qi, he had also obtained Su Chan's virgin yuan yang qi. Although the quality was not equal, the combination of the supreme yin and the supreme yang qi in the world was really like a dragon and a tiger, and water and ice were melted. Li Yundong's body suddenly underwent earth-shaking changes. At this time, his qi and blood were surging, and the beautiful woman in front of him was so active and charming. How could he bear it? He only let Su Chan sit on his body for a while, and then he got on the horse again and whipped. At this time both of them had experience, so they each guarded their qi. It was not until both of them were about to explode that they tacitly handed over their yuanjing to each other. This time the yuanyang qi in Li Yundong's body completely merged with Su Chan's yuanyang qi. Solitary yang did not last long, and it was easy to break when it was hard. This referred to the fact that although the yang qi in a man's body was strong and explosive, it was because it was too strong that this power could not last long. The so-called good is like water. Although it was the softest thing in the world, dripping water could wear through a stone. The precious thing was perseverance. Chu Ba Wang could lift 1,000 kilograms, but if he was asked to lift a weapon weighing 10 kilograms for a few hours without moving, he would not be able to do it even if he was killed. It could be seen that the most difficult thing about holding strength was endurance. Li Yundong's explosive power and endurance were among the best in the cultivation world, but he also knew that the last time he fought against the leader of the Tiantai sect, Imagawa Kagumo, who was in the Thunder Retribution realm, he had a big advantage. Firstly, Imagawa Kagumo's cauldron was decaying and his physical body was old. He was already at the age of an old steed in the stable. On the other hand, he was still young and his cauldron was full of vigor. He was at the age of a newborn calf. Secondly, Imagawa Kagumo had been severely injured previously. Otherwise he would not have coughed up blood and died in a battle. Compared to the golden body, the thunder tribulation was stronger in terms of endurance. Just think about it, a person could persevere under the continuous strikes of the heavenly thunder, but he couldn't persevere in a fight with mortals. What kind of logic was this? Therefore, Li Yundong knew that if Imagawa Kagumo fought with him without any injuries, he would probably be in danger. Even if he was young and full of vigor, it would be as difficult as ascending to heaven to exhaust the Jinchi of the other party in the thunder tribulation realm. At this time, Li Yundong's body had Su Chan's Yuanin Qi. It was like a man and a woman combining. From then on, yin and yang could intersect and give birth to a new life. When the two qis in Li Yundong's body intersected, they could produce yin and yang. From then on, the qi in his body would be endless and continuous. The same was true for Su Chan. She only felt that her body was extremely hot, as if there was lava rolling through her meridians. After the second time with Li Yundong, she finally couldn't withstand the steaming attack of the yang qi in her body and fell into a deep sleep. On the other hand, Li Yundong sat cross-legged and meditated, completely digesting the yuan-yin qi in his body. The two of them could be said to have taken what they needed. From now on, Li Yundong's spiritual power and jinqi had a lasting power. With his explosive power, this would undoubtedly make his strength achieve an astonishing breakthrough. After she fell asleep, the jinqi in her body surged, and she unconsciously revealed her fox body. Her whole body was covered with fiery red soft fur, and her 7 fox tails were constantly wriggling. After a while, the 8th tail grew out, and the 8th tail was the same color as the middle tail. They were both golden. Even the little girl herself didn't know that after she and Li Yundong had sex and cultivated together, she had broken through the biggest bottleneck of fox cultivation in one fell swoop. She had jumped from 7 tails to 8 tails. In fact, she was not the first fox spirit in the world to benefit greatly from sexual techniques. Before her, there was an old senior of the Fox Zen school, the mystical silver fox, who had set an example in this regard. The mystical silver fox's spiritual power and cultivation had made a qualitative leap. It was all because Zen master Huifa had saved her from the edge of Qigong deviation with his boy Yuanyang body. Although the two of them had met by chance, the mystical silver fox had obtained the boy Yuanyang qi of Zen master Huifa. From then on, the yin and yang qi in her body had merged and Buddhism and Taoism had merged. Since then, her spiritual power and jinqi had been endless and vast. When she had completely passed through the thunder tribulation and cultivated to the golden immortal realm, her strength had far surpassed that of ordinary golden immortals, and she had become a monster that others in the cultivation world could not reach. Of course, if it was just the boy Yuanyang qi of an ordinary boy, it would be fine. However, Huifa was the reincarnation of Manjushri Bodhisattva. His boy Yuanyang qi was no worse than that of Xuanzang. When Xuanzang went to the west to seek scriptures, how many demons and ghosts wanted to eat his flesh and how many female demons wanted to have sex with him? Could it be that these female demons only valued Xuanzang's handsome appearance? Don't be kidding. When it came to cultivation, could being handsome be eaten? Xuanzang was one of the greatest translators of Han Buddhism in China. Moreover, compared with Huifa, the rarest thing about him was that he was neither the reincarnation of living Buddha nor the reincarnation of Bodhisattva. He was just an ordinary mortal. His original name was Qin Zhao. When he was young, he became a monk because his family was in difficulty and he could not make a living. Tang Sanzang was famous in Qingdu in China during the Sui dynasty. When he was 22 years old, he went to Jingzhou to preach Buddhism, attracting famous monks from the Huaihai area to gather and listen to his lectures devoutly. Even the 60-year-old eminent monk Zhi Yan was very respectful to him. When he was 25 years old, Xuanzang traveled around Chang'an and studied all kinds of theories. His talent was so great that it shook Chang'an. Such an eminent monk, his boy Yuanyang was really a treasure that could not be bought with money. It was not enough to describe it as priceless. He was going to the west to seek scriptures. Which female cultivator would not be envious and which female demon would not be shocked? If she absorbed his boy Yuanyang, she could really save dozens of years of cultivation. Huifa was born at the end of the Tang dynasty, but he was the reincarnation of Manjushri Bodhisattva. His talent was even higher than Xuanzang's. Therefore, after his boy Yuanyang was taken away by the mystical silver fox, he immediately created an almost unbeatable monster in the world. Li Yunyang was the reincarnation of the immovable wisdom king. In terms of profound knowledge and comprehension of Buddhist scriptures, he might not be as good as Xuanzang and Huifa, but in terms of spiritual power cultivation and Yuanyang, he was far better than the two of them. Therefore, as soon as his boy Yuanyang was taken by Su Chan immediately soared into the sky. Her spiritual power cultivation suddenly surpassed Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin, and even surpassed the 8-tailed fox Lu Yi. If other female cultivators knew about such a coincidence, they would be so envious that their eyes would turn red. However, such a thing could only happen once, not twice. After all, a boy Yuanyang could only be a virgin once, and it was impossible for a man to be a virgin for the rest of his life. When Li Yundong opened his eyes again, he was shocked by Su Chan. Although he had seen Su Chan show her real body at that time, she was a small 3-tailed fox spirit. But now she was a huge 8-tailed fox in the room like a small mountain. In particular, the 8 tails of the 8-tailed fox kept swaying like tassels, and the 2 golden tails in the middle were flowing with a faint golden brilliance, which was very beautiful. Li Yundong was both surprised and happy. He was surprised that 2 of Su Chan's 8 tails were golden, which was very dazzling and strange. He was happy that Su Chan had broken through to the realm of the 8-tailed fox in the blink of an eye. She was only 1 level away from the highest realm of the 9-tailed fox. Li Yundong was surprised by the rapid progress of the little girl's cultivation, but he couldn't help but be happy and worried. While he was happy for Su Chan, he couldn't help but worry. If the little girl continued to cultivate like this and reached the realm of the 9-tailed fox, what should he do? Since ancient times, when the 9-tailed fox appeared, the world would be in chaos. This was not something that could be casually said. If the little girl cultivated to the realm of the 9-tailed fox, what would happen? Li Yundong didn't dare to think about it, nor did he want to think about it. Although he had vaguely guessed something, he was more and more sure of one thing in his heart. He had to take good care of the girl in front of him and love her as much as she loved him without any regrets. Li Yundong silently watched Su Chan. After a while, the beautiful fox fur on Su Chan's body slowly faded, revealing a curvy and curvaceous body. The little girl fell asleep in a daze, not knowing that she had become the fox spirit with the highest cultivation in the Fox Zen school. Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. He reached out to pinch the tip of the little girl's nose and shouted softly, "Hey girl, wake up. The sun is shining on your butt." Su Chan vaguely heard Li Yundong's shout. She was slightly startled and her body trembled. She quickly rubbed her eyes and forced herself to open them. She looked out only to see that there was a thunderstorm outside. The sky was dark and there was no sun. The little girl suddenly became unhappy and muttered, "You're so annoying. You lied to me. Where is the sun?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Are you stupid? Let's fly up and go through the clouds. Can't we see it?" Su Chan still pouted and said, "I'm not a Jinshin master. How can I go through the clouds? It's full of heavenly thunder." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Are you really not a Jinshin master now? Are you sure?" When Su Chan heard Li Yundong's words, she was stunned. Then she subconsciously ran the Jinshi in her body. The little girl's eyes immediately widened and she said, I broke through to the realm of the 8-tailed fox? How is this possible?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "Don't you see what treasure you've got?" Only then did Su Chan remember that she had obtained the Yuan Yang of Li Yundong, the reincarnated Wisdom King, which was equivalent to decades of hard work. Moreover, this aura was the purest supreme Yang Qi in the world. It was definitely not addition. Once this aura merged with her supreme Yin Qi, the effect would cause her cultivation to increase exponentially. Su Chan couldn't help but be overjoyed. In this way I can go through the thunder retribution with you." Li Yundong laughed and put his arms around the little girl's soft waist. "Okay, I'll accompany you to see the meteor shower." Su Chan giggled and said, "How can there be a meteor shower at this time? There is a thunderstorm." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Then I'll take you to see the thunderstorm." After that, the two of them looked at each other and smiled. After the Yang spirit left their bodies, they flew towards the rolling thunderclouds hand in hand. Chapter 834. Li Yundong and Su Chan had just flown together, and their love for each other was like oil and honey. They were really reluctant to be separated even when the Yang spirit was flying into the sky. Their fingers were tightly intertwined, as if they were afraid that the other would disappear in the next second. At this time, although it was raining heavily, thunder and lightning were intertwining in the clouds, and the world was dark. Only when lightning flashed and thunder rumbled would it instantly illuminate the world. However, in such a hazy night, Li Yundong and Su Chan felt very bright in their hearts, and the rumbling thunder in their ears seemed to reveal a sense of joy. The two of them held hands and were about to fly into the thunderclouds when they suddenly heard the thunder inside and a loud crack. Li Yundong looked up and saw that after the thunder, countless golden lights were scattered everywhere. After a while, they flew back to their home in Tianan City. Li Yundong smiled and said, "It seems that Ziyuan and Zhou Qin are going through the thunder retribution." Su Chan blinked her eyes and said, They are so powerful. They can start going through the thunder retribution now. By the way, Yundong, who do you think is going through the thunder retribution?" Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, "It's hard to say. Could be anyone. Both of them have been taught by Master Zhang Zhishuan. As long as they understand what infinite void is and what unity of heaven and man is, they will be qualified to go through the thunder retribution. Both of them are talented and intelligent, and they are extremely rare cultivation geniuses. Ziyuan was originally an inner disciple, so she has a very deep understanding of cultivation. The reason why she has not made any breakthrough in cultivation is that she is stuck in the bottleneck of Yang spirit and Jinshin. Previously, when she absorbed the divine qi of the Diuan Jindan on Tiandu Peak, it can be said that she has successfully broken through to the Jinshin phase. With her comprehension and aptitude, it is not difficult for her to comprehend the immortal Jinshin phase. Although she did not inherit such divine power, her body was also transformed by the elixir. Although her cultivation has always been a little lower than Ziyuan's, she has been cultivating hard. The time and energy she spends on cultivation every day are far more than ours. Moreover, she has read the heaven patching technique before and has a deeper understanding of cultivation. I think it is not surprising that she has broken through to the realm of the immortal golden body at this time. As Li Yundong was speaking, he saw another person flashing with a faint golden light fly out of the house in Tianan City. From a distance, he could vaguely recognize that it was a woman. The woman had a slim figure and exuded an ethereal and elegant aura. Su Chan immediately laughed and said, "I know. This is Sister Ziyuan." That was Sister Zhou Qin just now. The two of them are so powerful. They're taking turns to undergo the lightning tribulation. Li Yundong also nodded with approval in his eyes. He turned back and pinched Su Chan's nose. "You can go through the thunder tribulation now. Do you want to go with me?" Su Chan made a face at Li Yundong and said, "No, it's not good to go through the thunder tribulation together. It's easy to get into trouble." Li Yundong knew that if two people went through the thunder tribulation in a thundercloud, it was indeed easy to cause a big accident, because the power of the heavenly thunder was automatically judged according to the strength of the person who was going through the tribulation. The stronger the person was, the more powerful the heavenly thunder would be, and vice versa. If two people went into a thundercloud at the same time to undergo the thunder tribulation, the heavenly thunder would automatically add up the strength of the two people and determine that they were one person. Then the terrifying heavenly thunder would fall. Such a heavenly thunder was definitely not something a person could withstand alone. Even Li Yundong would be scared out of his wits. Li Yundong saw that Su Chan's words were reasonable, so he said with a smile, "Well, let them go through the thunder tribulation first. Let's go play in the sky for a while." This thundercloud was huge and continuous, almost covering the entire Tianan city. Li Yundong took Su Chan and flew far away before they got out of the range of the thundercloud. The two of them flew up into the sky hand in hand. After passing through the rolling thundercloud, they suddenly broke through the thick clouds. The bright moonlight immediately sprinkled on them like water, making them look like they were wearing a thin layer of white gauze. Li Yundong took Su Chan's hand and stood high in the sky with her. Looking down, the two of them saw thick black clouds rolling under their feet, and the starry sky around them seemed to have been washed. Although they didn't see the sun that Li Yundong had mentioned before, the bright moon was hanging high in the sky. Except for the dull thunder rolling under their feet, there was no other sound. Only the eternal starry sky and the cold full moon accompanied them, silent and bright, and they were in a tranquil space. At this time, the world was quiet, and there was no tense atmosphere of transcending the thunder tribulation. Li Yundong and Su Chan held hands, looked at each other and smiled. Li Yundong saw that the little girl was smiling sweetly, as if honey was about to flow out of the corners of her eyes and eyebrows. She was extremely sweet. He couldn't help laughing and said, "Why are you smiling so happily?" Su Chan held Li Yundong's hand tightly and said in a daze, "Yundong, my biggest dream in the past was to travel around with you. Now this dream has suddenly come true. I feel happy in my heart. I'm so afraid that this happy life will not last long." Li Yundong laughed and reached out to pinch the tip of the little girl's nose. "Don't be silly. We will always be happy. I'll take you wherever you want to go in the future, okay?" Su Chan was delighted when she heard this. She happily stretched out her little finger and said, "Okay, let's make a pinky promise for 100 years. The two of them held hands affectionately and swore to the sky like two children, making a vow that would last for 100 years. At this moment, in the faraway Japan, a thunderstorm had also descended on this land. In the sky above Mie Prefecture, a loud crack of thunder shattered the night. A bolt of lightning cut through the sky and suddenly illuminated the world. Se Chumo's beautiful face was also instantly illuminated by the lightning, but it was only for a moment. Soon, lightning rolled across the sky, and her face was quickly hidden in the night along with the surrounding shrines. Next to her, Isi Xinguang was sitting cross-legged in the long corridor of the shrine, with a tea tray and tea set in front of him. He was making tea leisurely, looking up at the sky from time to time, which was filled with thunder and lightning. Mie Prefecture was an important place for tea in Japan. Its output ranked third in the country and it had a long history of tea culture. Similarly, this prefecture had once been the ancestral home of Ise Shinto. Even in modern times, many foreign tourists came to Mie Prefecture. If they didn't go to the famous Ise Grand Shrine, it was equivalent to not going to Mie Prefecture. Behind Ise Shingguang was the famous Fengshoku Grand Shrine of the Ise Grand Shrine. Looking at these buildings during the day, people would feel that these antique Japanese-style buildings exuded a sense of solemnity and majesty, like a neat line of samurai, which made people not dare to be presumptuous. When night fell, the divine palace was hidden in the darkness, like a group of giants hiding behind a curtain of darkness, adding to its majesty. Especially at this time, the rain was like strings of pearls that flowed along the eaves of the divine palace, forming curtains of water. This made this place even more mysterious. Oh, it's true. This time the thunder retribution period seems to be particularly powerful. After pouring himself a cup of tea, Ise Shingguang held the teacup in one hand and stroked his unshaven chin with the other, clicking his tongue. Ise Shingguang's words seemed to be directed at Ise Izumo, but it also seemed like he was talking to himself. Izumo looked down at him, then continued to look up at the sky, as if he was thinking about something while looking at the rolling thunderclouds in the sky. Ise Shingguang looked at her curiously and couldn't help asking, "Hey, you've been looking up for a long time. Aren't you afraid that your neck is sore? Is it that beautiful? Why didn't I find that you used to be so interested in thunder and rain?" Ise Chuyun lowered her head again and looked at Shingguang deeply. She said softly, "I'm wondering, why did Li Yundong defeat me so easily back then?" Ise Shingguang couldn't help sighing. He knew that Ise Chuyun was proud and arrogant. Although she had been defeated by Li Yundong at that time, after returning home, she couldn't understand why Li Yundong, who was like an arrow at the end of its flight, could still defeat her. With this question in mind, when Ise Chuyun returned, she began to frantically read the cultivation classics of China's Taoism. In this era where knowledge and information were exploding, almost no sect or ancient book had any secrets to speak of. Perhaps the most important words had to be passed down orally by the head of the sect. Without these words, these martial arts would only be second-rate martial arts. But what Ise Chuyun wanted to find was the most basic reason. She began to suspect that there was something wrong with the cultivation methods of the Japanese, just like Tsuruko Tachibana, who had been fetching water for a long time with a wooden bucket with 5 holes. It was a very simple reason that restricted the development of the entire Japanese cultivation world. But even if there were wise people who understood it, they were powerless to change it. This was because the Japanese cultivation world had been flourishing since the Meiji Restoration. Even after the defeat in World War II, the cultivation world had become more and more prosperous and powerful by relying on General MacArthur's draft constitution on freedom of religious belief. However, at this time the Chinese cultivation world, which had been powerful for 2,000 years, had completely fallen to the bottom. Japan had used its own prosperity and strength to fight against China's decline. How could they not be disloyal when one side was on the other side? In the past 100 years, in the countless collisions between China and Japan, most of the Chinese and Japanese cultivation worlds had been the vanguard. The two sides had fought countless times, and the Japanese cultivation world had won several large-scale victories against China. This kind of victory had never been seen in the history of the Japanese cultivation world for more than 1,000 years. As a result, the attitude of the Japanese cultivators, who used to be respectful and cautious students, suddenly turned into the attitude of the arrogant and condescending nouveau riche. The so-called victory concealed everything. With the support of the government and the fanatical support of the people, the Japanese cultivators quickly cultivated a large number of murderous demons and fighting machines like Takahashi Shota. Their existence was completely different from the cultivators of the Chinese cultivation world, who existed for immortal cultivation. They only existed for one purpose: victory. In order to win, they would do anything. This kind of cultivation method was close to the devil's way, but when the whole country was possessed by the devil's way became the right way, and the real immortal way became the devil's way instead. Whether it was Japanese Buddhism or Ise Shrine, most of their cultivation methods paid attention to speed, stability, and ruthlessness. Moreover, this kind of power mostly came from faith and inheritance. With the support of the faith power of hundreds of millions of believers, it was too easy for a cultivator to become stronger through the power of faith. The cultivation of Japanese cultivators was fast and easy, so most of them only cultivated their nature and did not cultivate their fate. Therefore, they did not pay attention to the Juji phase, and it was impossible for them to go through the thunder tribulation. It was precisely because the power came so quickly and easily that the entire Japanese cultivation world fell into an inexplicable exaggeration and arrogance. No one was willing to think about it, and no one was willing to take the amazing risk of going through the thunder tribulation. But when these Japanese suddenly met Li Yunyang, the reincarnated wisdom king, and were defeated by him twice in a row, the entire Japanese cultivation world was shocked. Finally, some people began to seriously reflect. Issei Chuyun was one of them. She had become the Ksitigarbha goddess at a young age, and her power was equivalent to that of the thunder tribulation realm. It was extremely rare for her to have such achievements at such a young age, even in the 2,000 years of history of the cultivation world of China. Naturally, it was impossible for her to reach such a realm by relying on her own beauty, and it was even more impossible for her to rely on the support of the power of faith. She had relied more on her extraordinary understanding and intelligence. There was no lack of wise people in Japan, but due to the limitations of their innate structure, they were often short-sighted. They could only plan one thing but not the overall situation. Li Yunyang's head-on attack made Issei Chuyun vaguely feel that there seemed to be a huge problem with the cultivation methods of the entire Japanese cultivation world. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to be defeated by the same person again and again. But what was the problem? Issei Chuyun could feel that if he could understand this truth, not only would his strength improve by leaps and bounds, but even the entire Japanese cultivation world would be turned upside down. Sometimes the truth seemed simple to outsiders, but the insiders couldn't see it no matter how hard they tried. For example, Tsuruko Tachibana had been carrying a 5-leaky wooden bucket for so many years, but he just couldn't understand Wang Yuanshan's hint. Issei Chuyun also faintly looked at the rolling thunderclouds in the sky, deep in thought. But the answer he wanted seemed to be separated by an invisible layer of gauze. He could touch it but he couldn't get it. Issei Xingguang saw that Chuyun's eyes had been flickering, as if she was about to understand something in the next second. But the next second she still maintained this posture without moving at all. It was like there was an apple on her head that was on the verge of falling. If it fell, Newton would discover the law of universal gravitation, but the apple just wouldn't fall. Issei Xingguang looked at it and shook his head, then slowly drank his tea. It was at this moment that a bolt of lightning suddenly flashed in the sky, bringing with it a series of sparks. Issei Chuyun's eyes suddenly flashed. She stood up straight and was about to shout enlightenment. Suddenly, a figure flashed on the stone path outside the divine palace. It was a monk in a cassock and a bamboo hat. The monk didn't care about the heavy rain on his head. Before he got close, he shouted from afar, "Lord Xingguang, Lord Chuyun. Oh no, something big has happened." Issei Xingguang and Issei Chuyun both turned their heads to look at the monk at the same time. They saw the monk running to them, panting and saying breathlessly, "God, the mystical silver fox, has appeared." This sentence was no small matter. It immediately shocked the two of them and they said in unison, "What did you say?" The monk took a deep breath as if he had just run for more than 1,000 miles. "The mystical silver fox has appeared in Shuya, == well, there was a bug before. It should be rain after the beginning of spring and after the rain, it is Jingxia. I remembered it wrong and made it the vernal equinox. It has been corrected. I apologize to all my readers." Chapter 835. The mystical silver fox was a nightmare in the depths of the souls of Japanese cultivators. This evil existence was like a sword of Damocles hanging over their heads. No one knew when the sword would fall. Most of the Japanese cultivators did not go through the thunder retribution, and no one had the ability to completely destroy the mystical silver fox. They could only seal it. Therefore, the Tiantai sect and the ape family guarded the seal of the mystical silver fox from generation to generation, trembling with fear. But as time went by, after more than 900 years, even the most determined immortals would lose their vigilance over the long period of time. That was until that earth-shattering roar came from Kyoto, Japan. "Who can stop me?" Only then did the Japanese cultivation world wake up from a dream and recall the terrible history of the Emperor of Toba. After the escape of the mystical silver fox, the Japanese cultivation world organized a large-scale crusade army, but it was sunk by Li Jiandong on his own halfway. The defeat in this battle greatly weakened the morale of the Japanese cultivation world. No one wanted to think about the mystical silver fox. "Nanny, we can't even beat a little girl. How can we deal with the mystical silver fox? Fuck, let's wash and sleep." However, this kind of ostrich mentality did not let them live a few days of peace. What should come would come eventually, just a little later and a little earlier. Hearing that the mystical silver fox had suddenly appeared in Suyi, Issei Chuyun and Issei Xingguang really felt as if they had fallen into an ice cave, and their bodies were cold all over. At this time, the mystical silver fox appeared in Suyi, where she had been sealed. Why didn't she sweep over the sects of the Japanese cultivation world one by one and defeat them one by one? Instead, she chose to take the initiative to appear in Suyi? What does this mean? Has the mystical silver fox recovered her full strength? Does she want to pay the blood debt in this place? All the things that Isi Chuyun was about to understand before disappeared in an instant, and deep fear rose in his mind. The stronger a person was, the more he would understand the horror of the mystical silver fox. It was like the bigger a circle was, the larger the area it came into contact with, and the more he knew how big the world was. 900 years ago, the whole Japanese cultivation world joined forces with 80,000 elite soldiers to defeat the mystical silver fox. What about now? What were the odds of winning against the mystical silver fox with the decadent morale of the newly defeated army? Isi Shenko, who had always been a bit cynical, had a serious look on his face. He knew that this matter had put the Japanese cultivation world on the line. He turned his head and said to the monk in front of him, "Let's go to sumo." This kind of thing happened in Kyoto, Osaka, and other places in Japan. In an instant, the cultivation world of Japan turned out in full force. Almost all the masters carefully planned for the future before they went out, or some sects simply went out in full force. If they couldn't defeat the mystical silver fox, they wouldn't want to live. The land area of Japan was only 310,000 square kilometers. It was not even as big as China's Yunnan province. The entire country's land area was only about 3% of China's. If the weather forecast of China was reported one by one in the second-class cities, it would take 4 or 5 minutes. If it was reported one by one in the second-class cities, it would take half a day. However, the weather forecast of Japan could be summarized in one sentence. There would be rain in the whole country or no rain in the whole country. It was late at night and the sky was so dark that one could hardly see their fingers. When it was raining in Mie County, it was also raining in Haimu County, and it was pouring. Only at the moment of lightning and thunder could one see many small black spots in the sky flying towards Sumo in Haimu County through the light of the lightning. About 10 miles around the Life and Death Stone scenic area in Sumo, the rolling hills were covered with cultivators of various sections. When Ise Xingguang and Ise Chuyun landed, they found that all the masters of the 3 Buddhist giants, the Tiantai sect, the Pure Land sect, and the Xinyan Tantrism, had arrived. Many masters of the large-scale sects of the Shintoism had also arrived. At this time there were still many masters flying in the sky. Although flying in the sky at this time was easy to provoke the thunder retribution, in this urgent situation, in order to arrive as soon as possible, all the cultivators chose to fly here directly. If anyone was unlucky enough to be struck by the heavenly thunder, he could only say Amitba or shout Bakialu, and then die. At this time, the cultivators of the various sects did not hold up their lanterns. Instead they cast their magic. Some held a fireball that could not be extinguished by water, while others had a fireball that could not be blown away by wind and rain floating around them. Their figures were clearly illuminated. From afar, one could see the continuous flames on the mountain range like a fire dragon. It was majestic and imposing. At first, the cultivators from the Japanese cultivation world didn't dare to light a fire at all. They were afraid that after the fire was lit, the enemy would be in the dark and the mystical silver fox would come over and clean them up. But slowly, more and more people from the Japanese cultivation world came, and the Japanese people gradually became bolder. No one knew who was the first to start a fire, but slowly others also started a fire. It was as if more people walked at night and they became bolder. Their voices also became louder. When the cultivators of the major cultivation sects saw that Ise Chuyun and Ise Xingguang had also come, they were overjoyed. They all knew that these two were masters of the thunder retribution and were the leaders of the Japanese cultivation world. When they came, their momentum suddenly increased a lot. Some cultivators who were on good terms with Ise Chuyun and Ise Xingguang greeted them in a loud voice. Even in the thunderstorm, their voices spread far away, as if they were afraid that the mystical silver fox could not hear them. Ise Chuyun and Ise Xingguang, the two top experts of the Ise Shinto, looked at each other, their eyes full of worry. At this time, Abe Yoli, the patriarch of the Abe family, also came over with a tall and long sun hat. He looked at them with questioning eyes as if asking if they had the confidence to fight. Ise Chuyun's face darkened. She shook her head slightly and sneered in a low voice, "Listen to the voices of these guys, a group of idiots. Can the loud voice scare the mystical silver fox away? They are almost scared out of their wits." Although Ise Chuyun's voice was low, some people next to him still heard it. They all looked at I See Chuyun with displeased and reproachful eyes. Seeing this, I See Xinguang immediately interrupted with a smile. "Oh Yoli, what kind of weather is this? Don't you feel uncomfortable wearing such a hat?" Abe Yoli smiled bitterly. As the patriarch of the Abe family, as long as he went out, he naturally had to pay attention to his demeanor. This was the accumulation and demeanor of a 1,000-year-old family. Even if he died, he had to die gracefully. Abe Yoli raised his hands and clasped them in his long and wide white sun robe. He used his sleeves to hide his bitter smile and his voice. He said in a low voice, "Xinguang, I have a request." Although there was an incomparably fierce battle ahead, I See Shenko still appeared sloppy. He behaved like a Japanese. His hands were tucked into his kimono, and his arms were not in the sleeves. Instead, they were protruding from his chest. He hugged his chest with one arm and stroked his beard with the other. I See Xinguang smiled and said, "Yoli, if you have anything to say, just say it. We have been friends for decades. You don't have to be so polite." Abe Yoli used his sleeves to cover his face. His face was serious, but his eyes were full of pleading. He said in a low voice, "This time, my son has to follow me to fight against the mystical silver fox. If I don't let him, he will commit suicide. Our Abe family has an irreconcilable blood feud with the mystical silver fox. Our Abe family will be the first to bear the brunt of the battle. In case something happens to me, you have to take care of my son." I See Shinkuin immediately stopped smiling. He looked at the excited Abe not far away and couldn't help but sigh. A newborn calf is really not afraid of a tiger. With that, he withdrew his gaze and said very solemnly, "Don't worry, Yoli. I will take good care of him." As he said that, he smiled and said, "You're worrying too much, Ruli-san. We have many experts here. In terms of strength, we far exceed the Japanese cultivation world of 900 years ago. Moreover, Ruli-san is a very powerful great Yin-Yang master. Nothing will happen." Abe Yoli forced a smile and remained silent. After a while, Aichiyun suddenly turned his head and said to Abe Yoli, "Lord Abe, how did the mystical silver fox appear here?" Abe Yoli looked at several monks shivering in the cold wind and rain in the temple near Susano in the distance and said in a low voice, "They found that someone was crossing the thunder tribulation here. Out of curiosity, they went to check it out. Unexpectedly, when they checked, they found a 9-tailed fox entrenched in a hotel." Si Chuyun frowned and said, "Didn't the mystical silver fox kill them?" Abe Yoli shook his head and said, "No, she must have let them go on purpose." Si Chuyun took a deep breath and said, "She's coming at us in a menacing manner." Although it was quite unlucky to entrust an orphan to an orphan at the last moment, everyone's heart was heavy as if a huge stone was pressing on it. Even the shouts of cultivators from various sects around them could not hide the fear in their hearts. They couldn't understand why the mystical silver fox dared to appear here all of a sudden, and why she would rather wait for all of them to gather than take the initiative to attack. Was she waiting for them to meet up and kill them all in one fell swoop? Thinking of this, the cultivators of all sects in the Japanese cultivation world were both angry and frightened. At the same time, in a small hotel in Suyi, Lu Feier stood in the yard in horror, looking at the continuous fire on the distant mountain range. Her eyes were full of fear as she looked at the mystical silver fox in front of her. After getting along these days, she also knew a lot about the past of the mystical silver fox, and she also knew that she was going to start a massacre here. Although the mystical silver fox's methods were a little fierce and cruel, after all, they were all members of the same clan. They were not outsiders who were not of the same clan. Most importantly, if the mystical silver fox died, she was afraid that she would be finished. She would definitely be regarded as an accomplice by the Japanese. She would probably die. She looked at the constantly twisting fire dragon in fear, and was even more frightened by the voices of many people coming from the mountain range. Lu Feier couldn't help asking, "There are so many people. Can you win?" The mystical silver fox's spiritual power and Jinchi still existed, but she had forgotten a lot of her understanding of magic and cultivation. It was equivalent to walking on her own cultivation path again. Because she had walked it before, it was very fast to walk again at this time. Li Jiandong had only passed the first round of Thunder Retribution, and she had already passed the 9th round of Thunder Retribution. It could be said that her cultivation had been restored. Except that she had not found her fox's real body, her spiritual power was no less than that of 900 years ago. At this time, the mystical silver fox was standing alone in the yard. It was empty around her. There was neither a guest nor a master. The innkeeper had already escaped. She stood alone in the rain. Although it was raining heavily around her, there was not a drop of rain on her body. The bean-sized raindrops hit the roof tiles and made a crackling sound like fried beans, but when they fell on her body, they were automatically bounced off. The figure of the mystical silver fox looked extremely delicate and weak. Compared with the dazzling fire dragon on the top of the mountain, she was too small. However, she was wearing a fiery red dress, and the 2 white fox tails under the dress were dragging on the ground like the hem of a skirt. The 7 golden fox tails rushed up and kept twisting. When the mystical silver fox heard Lu Feier's words, she looked up at the fire on the mountain range and suddenly sneered, "These cowards. They're just a bunch of mobs. I treat them like dirt and clay dogs." Lu Feier didn't believe it in her heart. Her gaze was seen by the mystical silver fox. The mystical silver fox immediately snorted and said, "You don't believe it? Well, watch me kill the enemy." As soon as she finished speaking, her figure moved and quickly disappeared from where she was, leaving only a faint afterimage that slowly disappeared. Almost at the same time, the fire on the distant mountain range was bright, and the fire dragon quickly twisted and churned. After a while, the mystical silver fox appeared in the same place again, covered in blood, holding 2 bloody heads in her hands. At this time, the afterimage left by her had not disappeared, and the cries of surprise, screams and curses from the distant mountain range could be clearly heard, and they could not be heard for a long time. At this moment, Lu Feier was really stunned. She knew that the mystical silver fox, a monster known as the Uzeo in Japan, was very strong, but she didn't expect that the mystical silver fox was so strong. The mystical silver fox threw the 2 heads on the ground, as if she were hitting grass bandits. She raised her head and laughed. Her voice was like waves and it was sent out in waves. "I'm the mystical silver fox. Who dares to fight with me?" In an instant, the sound on the mountain range disappeared, and there was a dead silence between heaven and earth. There will be another update later, but don't wait. Chapter 836. The voice of the mystical silver fox shook the sky, almost shattering the courage of every Japanese cultivator and frightening their hearts. They didn't expect that the mystical silver fox would suddenly kill them. When they were unprepared, she killed 2 people in a row, took their heads and left calmly. Her speed was as fast as lightning, so fast that even top cultivators like them couldn't react. In particular, the next words of the mystical silver fox made almost every Japanese cultivator's face turn red in an instant, especially the brothers of the 2 dead cultivators. They clenched their fists tightly, tears in their eyes, and blue veins and blood vessels on their faces. This was a great shame. The mystical silver fox had killed 2 people in a row in front of them and then retreated calmly. However, it was such a great shame and such monstrous hatred that these cultivators, who had lost their friends, suppressed their angry roars and buried them in their throats, as if there was an invisible mountain sitting on their throats. Not only them, but even Ise Chuyun and Ise Xinguang were also taken away by the momentum of the mystical silver fox. For a moment they were stunned and couldn't come to their senses. But soon their faces turned red and their eyes were wide open. Just when everyone was angry but didn't dare to say anything, suddenly Abe Nakian, the reasonable son of the Abe family, roared angrily, "Abe family, Abe Nakian is here. I dare to fight." This cry immediately made every Japanese cultivator feel ashamed. After all, they were all proud and arrogant masters, but for a moment they were robbed of their momentum by the mystical silver fox. At this time someone made the cry of a horse and they immediately broke out. For a moment, the roars on the mountain range were like thunder, and there were bursts of curses. With so many peerless experts cursing at the same time, the sound was truly terrifying. Lu Feier only felt as if she was in a football stadium that could accommodate 100,000 people, and everyone in this football stadium was hysterically roaring at her. Her ears were almost deafened, and her heart and lungs were trembling non-stop. Lu Feier covered her ears, and her face became more and more frightened, as if she would be shocked to death by the voices of these people in the next second. However, the mystical silver fox stood in the yard, not afraid at all. Instead, she raised her head and laughed loudly. She said to Lu Feier with a proud face, "How is it? I said that this is a mob, right? They actually want a little child who hasn't even grown up to speak, so they dare to curse. Ha ha ha, a group of timid people, nothing to be afraid of." The mystical silver fox was so complacent that her words became half written and half spoken. Seeing that Lu Feier was so scared that she couldn't help herself, she smiled and said, "Don't be afraid. You with me here, no one in the world can hurt you at all. If you think they're noisy, I'll stop them right now." After saying that, her figure instantly disappeared on the spot and suddenly appeared in the sky above the mountain range. In an instant, the mystical silver fox appeared in front of the cultivators of various sects in Japan. She opened her beautiful eyes, and her beautiful face was full of ferocious killing intent. She said condescendingly, "Who wants to die?" The cultivators of various sects in Japan had been cursing for a long time, but they didn't see the mystical silver fox appear. At this time, they suddenly saw her appear in front of them without warning. They were all shocked at once and the cursing stopped abruptly. The earth-shattering curses disappeared in an instant. Seeing that they had stopped talking immediately, the silver fox asked sternly, "Who dares to come forward and die?" At this time her 7 golden fox tails rose into the sky, as if they were going to cover the sky and the earth. Everyone felt that the dark sky in front of them had turned golden at this time. The momentum of the mystical silver fox was too terrible. She shouted 3 times in front of the crowd, but no one dared to answer. Abe Nakian, who had shouted for a fight before, felt that his whole body was paralyzed with fear. Not to mention standing up to fight, he couldn't even shout at this time. The mystical silver fox asked a few questions in a row. Seeing that no one dared to answer, she raised her head and laughed 3 times. Her figure flashed, and her fox tail reached into the crowd. Then she turned into a shadow and disappeared. When the crowd saw that the shadow had completely disappeared, a pillar of blood shot up into the sky. It was the cultivator of the Deshang sect who had been beheaded at some point. At this time, blood spurted out from his neck. Everyone was shocked and horrified. At this time they didn't even have the courage to curse. Their hearts were cold. Se Chuyun and Se Xinguang looked at each other, and the fear in each other's hearts was hard to control. They all knew that the mystical silver fox was so free to come and go. In terms of momentum, it completely overwhelmed so many people here. It was not only because they had a natural fear of the mystical silver fox, but also because the mystical silver fox had reached an unimaginable realm. Most of their understanding of the silver fox came from the text. Moreover, in their opinion, the Japanese cultivation world 900 years ago was completely a vassal of the Chinese cultivation world. Their relationship was like that of a teacher and a student. At that time, the Chinese cultivation world was in a very prosperous state, while the Japanese cultivation world had just started. Even if the cultivators at that time were powerful, they must have been extremely limited. Now, after 900 years of development, were they not as good as the ancients? Moreover, in the past 100 years, the Japanese cultivation world had won many times over the Chinese cultivation world, which had made them more and more arrogant. It was not until Li Jiandong beat them up that they calmed down a little and began to realize the power and terror of the silver fox. Was the immovable wisdom king powerful enough? But in those days, the reincarnation of the immovable wisdom king had also gathered a large group of cultivators to break up the soul of the silver fox. Li Jiandong, the reincarnation of the wisdom king, could beat them like this with his own strength. What about the silver fox? Therefore, Li Jiandong had dealt a very serious blow to the Japanese cultivation world. When they faced the silver fox, they had already lost their morale before the battle. Moreover, more importantly, none of them realized that the Japanese cultivation world could only stare at the strongest demon in Japan, Yamada no Orochi, and could do nothing about it. They could only wait for the silver fox to deal with Yamada no Orochi. Only then did some scholars jump out to beautify themselves, saying that Susanoo had killed Yamada no Orochi. Anyway, the silver fox had been sealed at this time. No matter how they boasted, no one would cause trouble for them. The Japanese cultivation world couldn't beat Yamada no Orochi together, and Yamada no Orochi didn't have any temper when it met a mystical silver fox with only 1 soul and 2 souls left. Then why could these Japanese cultivators beat mystical silver fox together? In fact, what played a very important role in this was the 80,000 soldiers sent by the Heavenly Bird Feather Emperor. These 80,000 soldiers were all mortals, and they were very strong and fearless of death. They rushed toward the silver fox with mystical luck like crazy, which made the silver fox with mystical luck afraid to take action. On the one hand, she had to deal with the fierce attacks of the cultivators, and on the other hand, she had to be careful not to kill more mortals and quickly provoke the divine tribulation. As a result, her cultivation was greatly reduced, and her amazing speed was nailed to the ground and she could not use it. In the end, she was swarmed by a group of cultivators and finally knocked to the ground. However, after the matter was over, no one in the cultivation world admitted the role of these 80,000 soldiers. They just wanted to stick all the credit of sealing the silver fox with mystical luck on their faces. Even if they wanted to share it with other sects, they would not be willing to do anything. They argued with each other until their faces were red. How could they be willing to share the credit with ordinary mortals? Therefore, up to now, no cultivator had thought of this point. Besides, even if wise men like Se Chuyun and Se Xinguang had thought of it, there was nothing they could do. Could it be possible to organize 80,000 Japanese soldiers to attack the Silver Fox with mystical luck? How many people were there in the Japanese self-defense forces? Besides, it was no longer the era of the unity of politics and religion in Japan. Now the separation of politics and religion, the affairs of the cultivation world should be handled by themselves, and it would never be publicized to the outside world. To say the least, even if so many people were really organized to attack the Silver Fox with live ammunition, it would be amazing and the odds of winning would be great, but, if these soldiers of the self-defense forces who had fled countless times when they encountered the explosion of the Fukushima nuclear power plant, were really going to face the Silver Fox with mystical luck, then, it was better to say, fuck wash and sleep. When the Silver Fox with mystical luck returned to the yard, she was carrying 2 more heads in her hands. She threw them on the ground and said with a laugh, "How is it? Is it quiet now?" Lu Feier couldn't help but put down her hand and looked at the Silver Fox with a face full of shock. She couldn't believe that there was such a strong person in the world. Lu Feier was speechless for a moment. The Silver Fox with mystical luck's face was full of pride. Just as she was about to speak, she suddenly heard an even more terrifying curse coming from the mountain range. Then, countless spells were bombarded into the yard. The mystical Silver Fox was furious. In an instant, she rose into the air and waved her 7 golden tails. Like a huge cattail leaf fan that blotted out the sky and the earth, she swept all the magic spells back in an instant. For a moment, the people on the top of the mountain were in a mess. The Silver Fox with mystical luck felt that she had lost face in front of Lu Feier, and her killing intent rose in her heart. Her figure flashed, and in an instant, she flew towards the young man who had cursed the most fiercely. She remembered that the young man had clearly said that he was a member of the ape family. The Silver Fox with mystical luck laughed grimly in her heart. The ape family? That's great. I can use you as an example. She suddenly appeared in front of Abe Neazin, and her 5 fingers were like hooks, grabbing towards the top of his head. With this grab, even a Vajra bronze statue would be crushed by her. Abe Neazin was so scared that his eyes stared blankly. He didn't even have the consciousness to dodge or resist, and his mind was blank. On the other hand, Abe Yoli, who was eager to protect his children, roared and rushed out in an instant. His spirit Shikigami also rushed towards the Silver Fox with mystical luck crazily. The Silver Fox with mystical luck didn't even look at it. With just one punch, she smashed the spirit Shikigami into pieces with a bang. At the same time, she rushed to the front of Abe Yoli like a hot knife through butter. Another punch was aimed at the front of Abe Yoli's chest. Se Xingguang and Se Chuyun, who were next to him, were shocked and rushed towards the Silver Fox with mystical luck. Their cultivation was extremely high. At this time, when they attacked at the same time, their power was amazing and the earth was shaken. But the speed of the Silver Fox with mystical luck was amazing. When they rushed in front of her, she had already punched through Abe Yoli's chest. At the same time, when she quickly stretched out her hand, she gently wiped Abe Yoli's neck with the tip of her finger. This slender hand was like a sickle cutting chives. She cut off the head of the famous great Inyang master of Japan and sent it flying into the sky. The headless body of Abe Yoli didn't move at all. Blood gushed out of his chest, and the blood on his neck soared to the sky for more than 3 meters. After the blood splashed down, it still became cold, and Abe Yoli's head was full of ferociousness. The young master Abe stared at his father's body with his eyes wide open. After the blood drained in an instant, he finally shook a few times and fell heavily to the ground. At this time in the crowd, where the wild laughter of the Silver Fox with mystical luck sounded, there was blood soaring into the sky. The mountain range had already become a piece of land. Countless masters were chasing after the Silver Fox with mystical luck, but they couldn't even touch one of her fingers. At this moment, Abe Yoli didn't even feel the anger and pain of losing his father. He thought desperately, Amaterasu God. If this is a nightmare, then let this nightmare wake up as soon as possible. Please? The cultivators in the Japanese cultivation world had expected that this would be a bitter battle, but they hadn't expected that it would be an overwhelming massacre. Chapter 837. In the blink of an eye, the mystical Silver Fox had killed through the cultivators of various sects in Japan. For a time, the top of the mountain was covered with blood. Heads were rolling on the ground and there were endless wails and screams. The experts of various sects who were chasing after the mystical Silver Fox felt their hearts turn cold. The more they chased, the more desperate they became. Their speed was not slow. On the contrary, it could also be described as a flash of lightning. In the eyes of ordinary people, it was as fast as thunder and fierce as angry. But no matter how fast they were, they could not compare with the mystical silver fox. The speed of the mystical silver fox had even surpassed that of a flash of lightning. Although it seemed to be a little faster than them, it was a gap that they could not surpass. They could only follow behind the mystical silver fox and eat the dust. They watched her back fight in the crowd, like a tiger entering a flock of sheep. This was the martial arts in the world. There was nothing that could not be broken, only speed could not be broken. There was a limit to the human body's reaction. Although most cultivators had broken through the reaction limit of mortals, there was a lower limit after all. At this time, the limit of their reaction could not keep up with the speed of the mystical silver fox. They clearly saw that she had pounced on them. They wanted to raise their hands to cast spells to resist, but their brains could not react and their bodies could not react. As soon as they raised their hands, the mystical silver fox had already punched through their chests. When their blood flowed rapidly and they were ready to cast spells, the slender hands of the mystical silver fox had already cut through their necks like sickles, and the blood in their heads and necks soared into the sky. After all, Ise Chuyun was an extremely outstanding cultivator in the Japanese cultivation world. She could tell at a glance that if they continued to fight like this, they would be wiped out by the mystical silver fox. She immediately said in a stern voice, "Everyone, the Yang spirit will fight." The reaction speed of the Yang spirit was far faster than that of the human body. It could even be said that it could reach the realm of following one's mind and body. As soon as Ise Chuyun shouted, these Japanese cultivators suddenly came to their senses one by one, and the Yang spirit came out of their bodies one after another. As soon as they came out of their bodies, they immediately caught up with the mystical silver fox. Everyone was in high spirits. They shouted angrily and pounced on the mystical silver fox. For a moment, the mystical silver fox was surrounded by people from all directions. She couldn't show her speed for a while, but she was proud and fearless. She shouted, "Come on!" After that, her hands flew, and the 7 golden fox tails swept around like steel whips. All around her, there was an incomparably ferocious gale. Wherever her golden fox tail swept past, rocks would immediately shatter, and people would immediately be sent flying. Up, down, left and right, there wasn't the slightest flaw. At her level of cultivation, in a close combat like this, spells and magic treasures became secondary. At this moment, even her pair of seemingly weak hands had become a terrifying killing machine. Anyone who touched her would die. Even if they didn't die, their bones would be broken. It was as if her whole body was filled with magic treasures, and every move she made was full of spells. Although the cultivators of the various sects in Japan had an overwhelming advantage in number, they were all fighting on their own. Some of the sects that wanted to form a formation could not form a formation for a while because of the scene. The mystical silver fox came and went like a ghost. This situation was really getting worse and worse, and the more the Japanese fought, the more desperate they became. After the mystical silver fox killed a few people in the crowd, she was already bathed in blood, as if she was wearing a blood-red battle robe. She laughed loudly and said, "Weak, weak. Too weak. I didn't expect that after 900 years the subordinates of Niaoyu the trash would be so weak. Ridiculous, really ridiculous." When everyone heard this, they were furious. They wanted to crush the mystical silver fox into powder immediately, but this kind of thought could only be thought of. None of them could keep up with the speed of the mystical silver fox, and no one could break the defense of the mystical silver fox's golden tail. Now the mystical silver fox was fighting with them in close combat with her own speed, and she had the golden tail to protect her body. It could be said that she was the only one who could hit others and no one else could hit her. There were many people in the Japanese cultivation world and there were many masters, but they lacked a top master who could entangle her. In the past, even if the Chinese cultivation world had encircled and suppressed the mystical silver fox, it was all thanks to the reincarnated Wisdom King who had entangled the mystical silver fox with his own strength, so that she could not exert her speed. Only then could the others calmly set up a magic formation and cast magic, and finally break her almost invincible heavenly fox real body. At this time, the Japanese cultivators knew how earth-shattering the battle between Suyi more than 900 years ago was, and how unprecedented the battle in the Chinese cultivation world 1,000 years ago was. These two battles between China and Japan were all because of one person. Only when they were facing this big devil did they understand how powerful their predecessors were more than 900 years ago. They could actually seal the mystical silver fox. However, what shocked them the most was that 1,000 years ago, the Chinese cultivation world had been able to defeat the mystical silver fox with a complete soul and the heavenly fox real body. How strong would he have to be to defeat such a powerful figure who was like a god? The Japanese cultivators were almost desperate. After killing a few more people, the mystical silver fox instantly broke out of the crowd's encirclement. She looked disdainfully at the Japanese cultivators who had almost lost their confidence in fighting and sneered, "A bunch of good-for-nothings. Killing you is a waste of time and energy. Hurry up and get help. I won't fight with people who are eager to die." After that, her figure flashed and disappeared in an instant, leaving only a strange shadow with 7 golden tails dancing constantly. She slowly disappeared in the thunderstorm night. With a rumble of thunder, the lightning illuminated the world in an instant. The cultivators of all sects in Japan looked around and saw the corpses of their friends everywhere. Although there were still many surviving cultivation masters, their faces were ashen and their eyes were filled with fear. Even a proud person like Isi Chuyun couldn't help murmuring in a low voice in despair, "It's over. I've lost my spirit. How can I fight again?" At this time Isi Xinguang was also covered in blood, but most of it was the blood that had been splashed by the mystical silver fox. At this time he no longer had a carefree look. Instead, his face was ferocious and nervous. He said in a deep voice, "The experts of all sects haven't arrived yet. When everyone is here we'll set up the formation and fight again. We may not lose." Zichuyin shook his head and said with a bitter smile, "It's useless. There's already a devil in their hearts. No matter how hard they fight, it's useless. Look at it yourself. Do they dare to face the mystical silver fox again? Even if all the experts came, they would be shocked by the horrible scene in front of them and be afraid. Lord Xinguang, we lack a lion. If a lion led a flock of sheep, it could also defeat a flock of lions led by a sheep." At this time, the lowest cultivation quotient of the cultivators of all sects in Japan was at the top level of Yang spirit. Could be said that there were many masters here. The number of masters was higher than that of the Chinese cultivation world. However, at this time the number could not defeat the quality. A mystical silver fox had completely defeated them. Isi Xinguang looked at the field, only to see that almost everyone on the field was standing still, as if they were walking corpses. The mystical silver fox had completely destroyed their self-confidence. Among them, the monk soldiers of the Pure Land True sect were especially obvious. At the beginning, the momentum of this group of monk soldiers was extremely strong, and they looked arrogant. But at this time they were like clay puppets and their eyes were empty. Isi Xinguang's heart was filled with grief. He couldn't help shouting, "Is God going to destroy our Japanese cultivation world? Lord Xinguang." At this time, a shout came from the side. Isi Xinguang turned his head and saw an old monk covered in blood coming over. The old monk was wearing a red cassock and had a solemn face. It was Kaisai Hikaryuni of Jinyin Tantrism. Isi Xinguang saw that although Kaisai Hikaryuni looked tired, there was no depression and despair between his eyebrows. He didn't dare to neglect him. He immediately saluted and said, "It turns out to be Master Kaisai Hikaryuni. Why are you here? If anything happens to you, who will lead the Jinyin Tantrism to continue moving forward?" Kaisai Hikaryuni sighed and returned the salute. "Amitabha, how can there be an intact egg when the nest is overturned? Lord Xinguang, let's not talk about this. In the face of a great disaster, we should be more sincere and united. You are the pillar of our cultivation world. You should support the situation." Isi Xinguang sighed heavily and said, "The situation is hopeless and I have no choice." Kaisai Hikaryuni's face suddenly changed. He stretched out his hand to slap Isi Xinguang and shouted, "Kill. As the leader of the ISE Shinto, how can you be so decadent? Are we going to sit still and wait for death? If we all think that there is no hope, then we might as well break all our fangs here." Kaisai Hikaryuni's voice came in waves in the dead silence of the rainy night, causing many cultivators to raise their heads. Isi Xinguang was also shocked by Kaisai Hikaryuni's shout. He immediately bowed down solemnly and said, "Thank you for your advice, Master. I understand." With that, he shouted at the crowd, "Everyone, it's too early to determine victory or defeat. Since our predecessors could seal the mystical silver fox once 900 years ago, we can still do it now. 1,000 years ago, the mystical silver fox could still be defeated when she was at her strongest. This shows that she is not invincible. Now she is arrogant and will definitely suffer. We must have a way to defeat her." The Japanese were the group of people who could withstand repression and torture the most in the world. Their endurance was the best in the world. This sentence shocked everyone's hearts and they cheered up one after another. Many cultivators cheered each other up and encouraged each other. Isi Xinguang and Kaisai Hikaryuni breathed a sigh of relief when they saw this scene. The Japanese cultivation sects had never been so sincere and united as they were in front of them. Everyone shared a common enemy, gave up the idea of sects and helped and supported each other. Kaisai Hikaryuni sighed and said, "That's right." However, Aizi Chuyun said rudely, "Master Kaisai Hikaryuni, forgive me for being presumptuous. If we could defeat the mystical silver fox by inspiring our morale, we would have won just now." For a moment, Aizi Chuyun's words immediately pulled Kaisai Hikaryuni and Aizi Xinguang, the two leading figures in the Japanese cultivation world, into the cruel and cold reality. Yes, how can we deal with the mystical silver fox? Chapter 838. The mystical silver fox fought in and out of the crowd. Her whole body was bathed in blood, but she was not injured at all. When she returned to the courtyard, she could not hide her complacency. The resentment that had been sealed for 900 years was finally exhaled at this time. She looked at Lu Fei triumphantly and said, "Well? Are these people still making noise?" Lu Fei looked at the mystical silver fox as if she was worshipping a god. She shook her head and said, "Stop it, stop it." The mystical silver fox laughed and said, "These people are just clowns. If it weren't for the fact that I didn't have the real body of the heavenly fox 900 years ago, how could they have had the chance to ride on my head?" At this time, Lu Fei's fate had been tightly tied with that of the mystical silver fox. She couldn't help worrying about her. Her face was full of timidity. She asked tentatively, "But aren't you afraid that if you give them time to breathe now, they can accumulate strength in the end?" The mystical silver fox sneered and said, "By themselves? A bunch of people who thought highly of themselves. In the era of bird feathers, there were a few monks and yin-yang masters who had some ability, but now, humph, a bunch of idiots who only know how to sleep and enjoy the fruits of our ancestors' labor." Lu Fei listened to her domineering words, but she didn't know that these Japanese cultivators had almost defeated the Chinese cultivation world. If they hadn't met the reincarnated Wisdom King, they wouldn't have been defeated so miserably today. As soon as they saw the mystical silver fox, they became soft. However, these people were definitely not pushovers. Many of them were master-level experts no matter where they were placed. Many of them were even grandmasters. However, in the eyes of the mystical silver fox, these masters were all vulnerable and worthless. How confident and domineering they were. Lu Fei swallowed her saliva and asked, "Then, what are you going to do next?" Mystical silver fox snorted and said, "Wait." "Wait." Lu Fei blinked. The mystical silver fox nodded and said, "Yes, wait." Lu Fei asked in confusion, "Wait for what?" The mystical silver fox smiled and said, "Wait for them to find reinforcements." Lu Fei was shocked. "There are so many of them and they have reinforcements?" The mystical silver fox snorted and said, "There are hundreds of millions of believers in Japan. It's not surprising that there are a few masters. However, for experts like them who cultivated their bodies and not their lives, it would be a waste no matter how many came. Why don't I ask them to come together so that I don't have to run around? I want to capture them all in one fell swoop." There was one more thing that the mystical silver fox didn't say. 900 years ago, the Japanese cultivation world came out in full force and sealed her here. Now, she wanted to take revenge here with her own hands and realize a 900-year reincarnation. Lu Fei hesitated for a moment. She didn't want to see the mystical silver fox die because of her arrogance. In that case, her little life would be lost with her. She thought for a moment, summoned up her courage and said, "Do they have any particularly powerful magic weapons or killing skills or something like that?" The mystical silver fox was stunned when she heard this. She couldn't help laughing out loud. "I'm not afraid." Lu Fei couldn't help asking again, "Then?" The mystical silver fox interrupted her impatiently and said coldly, "Their only chance of winning now is to quickly go to all the major cultivation sects in China to ask for help. Otherwise they have no chance of winning at all." Lu Fei's eyes widened. "They went to the cultivation sects in our country to ask for help? Then will the cultivation sects in our country agree?" The mystical silver fox sneered and snorted. She gritted her teeth and said, "They'd better agree so that I won't have to run around and settle all the old and new grudges here." Lu Fei looked at the mystical silver fox with fear on her face and complained in her heart, "Oh my God, she's a lunatic. It's okay for her to provoke the cultivators of Japan alone, but she even wants to provoke the cultivators of China together. It's over. It's over. I'm dead this time." But soon her heart skipped a beat. She suddenly thought of something and thought to herself, "By the way, will Li Jiandong come? Will he be a match for the mystical silver fox?" Lu Fei was thinking about it here. At this time, Aizi Xinguang and the others were discussing the countermeasures. All the sects present here had elected a leader. Everyone gathered together to discuss how to deal with the mystical silver fox. Someone proposed to take out the 3 national magic treasures of Japan to deal with the mystical silver fox, but as soon as this proposal was put forward, it was rejected with a sneer. Why didn't Yasuo, Abe and the others use these 3 great magic treasures to deal with the mystical silver fox? The reason is very simple: because it's useless. The 3 great magic treasures of Japan were the Yasakani no Kagami, the Kusanagi no Kagami and the 8-foot mirror. Among them, the political and religious functions of the Yasakani no Kagami and the 8-foot mirror were obviously greater than the practical functions of fighting. Among the 3 great magic treasures, the only one with combat power was the Kusanagi no Kagami. The main reason why the Kusanagi no Kagami could be called the first of the 3 great magic treasures of Japan was that Susanoo had used it to cut off the head of Yamada no Orochi. But was it really cut by Susanoo? According to the legends written by the Japanese themselves, even if Susanoo had killed it, he had taken a lot of good wine and made Yamada no Orochi drunk before he did it. It could be seen that Susanoo, the sea god of Japan, did not dare to cause trouble for Yamada no Orochi at all. Even if the Kusanagi no Kagami in his hand was a divine weapon, its power was extremely limited. The cultivators of Japan had read all the Chinese classics. Naturally, they knew that no matter in ancient times or in the feudal era, cultivators had never done anything like getting a demon drunk and then cutting off its head. This was too cowardly. The people of Chinese disdained to do such a thing. They had always greeted with the powerful magic treasures in their hands. After a while of magic, the world would be quiet. On the divine land of China, there were countless treasures and rare beasts. What kind of terrible magic treasures could they not have? But what about Japan? It was not easy for the sea god, Susanoo, to refine a great magic treasure, but he still did not dare to face Yamada no Orochi head-on. Thinking about the masters who had killed demons in the Chinese cultivation world for thousands of years, which one of them did not have several powerful magic treasures? Which one of them was not earth-shattering and powerful? Especially Li Yundong, this young man who had 3 or 4 powerful magical weapons by himself, each of which made them envious. Thinking of this, the Japanese cultivators could not help but burst into tears. Damn it! You can't afford to hurt a small country with a narrow land and scarce resources. What's more, now the 3 divine weapons were placed in the Imperial Palace in Tokyo, Japan. If they wanted to take them, they had to report to the Mikado first and get his approval. But if they went at this time, it would be equivalent to telling the Mikado, "Your Majesty, we are incompetent and have been abused by the mystical silver fox. Please take the 3 divine weapons to fight with me." But how could the Mikado not know how powerful these 3 divine weapons were? He would probably be choked in the face with wooden clogs, wouldn't he? F***ck, Susanoo did not dare to face Yamada no Orochi head-on with the Kusanagi no Orochi. Do you dare to face the mystical silver fox with the mystical silver fox who had defeated Yamada no Orochi? Have you eaten something wrong? It was a small matter to be scolded by the Mikado. If this matter spread out, all the sects would not be able to do business. Everyone would disband collectively, wash up and sleep. Therefore, the Japanese cultivation world could not take out the 3 divine weapons even if they were beaten to death. This was asking for trouble. After being denied, someone soon said timidly, "Then let's hurry up and set up the magic formation." But after saying this, the people of the other sects couldn't help but burst into tears again. Damn the magic formation. Didn't you see how many of our people were killed by the mystical silver fox just now? The magic formation was set up by a single sect. Now that many masters have been killed, how can they set up the magic formation? Don't you know the shortcoming theory? The power of the magic formation depends on the person with the lowest strength. Moreover, the cooperation must be extremely tacit. There are many masters here, but they are not on the same path. Do you want to play the magic formation with a temporary motley crew? Do you want to die? Aren't you afraid of the backfire of the magic formation? These words made everyone feel dejected again. Someone said angrily, "We can't do this, we can't do that. Are we going to ask the Chinese to be merciful and help us destroy the mystical silver fox?" After saying this, someone sneered and said, "Then we might as well cut our bellies together." However, Ise Xinguang and Kaisai Hikaryuni looked at each other. Their eyes lit up at the same time and they blurted out, "This is feasible." Everyone was shocked. Was it feasible to cut their bellies open? Two bosses calmed down. However, Kaisai Hikaryuni put his palms together and said seriously, "I mean, it's feasible to ask for help from the people of China." When everyone heard this, there was a sudden uproar. What kind of joke was this? They had just come back from China with their faces covered in dirt. Now they were going to beg them in a humble manner? No, this was absolutely not possible. They were all proud and arrogant. How could they bear such a great humiliation? As Xinguang knelt in the rain, put his hands on his knees, leaned forward slightly and said with a serious face, "Everyone, now is not the time to care about personal honor or disgrace. We have reached the edge of life and death. Everyone look around. Now that we can let go of our sects, why can't we let go of our racial prejudice?" Everyone felt depressed when they heard this. Who didn't understand this logic? But they had just formed a group to go to China to play dungeons aggressively. At that time they were very rude. Now that they were going to ask for help, would they agree? If they couldn't agree, wouldn't they lose face and fail to accomplish their task? Would they suffer a double loss? Kaisai Heikaryuni was shrewd. He glanced at the expressions on the faces of the leaders of the sects around him and understood what they were worried about. He said, "Benefactors, many of us have been to China before and have sworn never to step into China again in our lives. Therefore it's not suitable for us to go. Why don't we let those cultivators who haven't been there have a try? Even if it's a dead horse, it's better than sitting back and waiting for death, isn't it?" When everyone heard this, their eyes lit up. This was a good idea. They could send the younger generation to go. It wouldn't be shameful for the younger generation to ask the elders for help, would it? Besides, the cultivation world of China is separated by a strip of water. The mystical silver fox came from your side. You can't just sit back and do nothing, can you? If you destroy Japan, do you think you will be able to live a good life? The more these Japanese cultivators thought about it, the more feasible they felt. They clapped their hands and said, "Let's do it." However, after making the decision, they couldn't help but frown. Who should they send? Among the younger generation of the Japanese cultivation world, who could take on such a heavy responsibility? At that moment, someone thought of Abe Naomi, who had just lost his father, and said, "Mr. Naomi, you can go." Se Xinguang subconsciously wanted to object, but he thought that if Abe Naomi went, on the one hand he could get out of this dangerous place, and on the other hand he would be able to complete his reasonable entrustment to Abe. On the other hand, he was indeed the best of the younger generation of Japan. It would not be shameful to send him out. At this time he also said, "I think Tachibana Wakako of Mount Koya can also go." When everyone heard this, they nodded secretly. At this time, Kaisei Hikaryuni clapped his hands and said, "That's settled. Let the two of them go together. It's not good for them to go together. A man and a woman are just right." Everyone promised and scattered. Kaisei Hikaryuni also whispered a few words to the monks around him. After asking them to bring Tachibana Wakako, he fixed his eyes on the deep night. He knew that the cultivation world of China had been entangled for thousands of years. There were endless grievances and old feuds. The relationship between the two sides was complicated and sensitive. This time they had come to ask for help. Could they get what they wanted? Would the Chinese cultivation world send someone? Chapter 839. After the slaughter, the mystical silver fox did not take the initiative to find trouble with the Japanese cultivation world. Instead, in front of the Japanese cultivation world, she continued to swagger through the thunderclouds. It seemed that she was still not satisfied with her current spiritual energy situation, so she was constantly absorbing the power of heaven. When the Japanese cultivation world saw this, they were all frightened, but there was no better way. They could only pray that the masters of all sects in the Japanese cultivation world would gather soon. In addition, they prayed that Abe Naomi and Tachibana Wakako could persuade the Chinese cultivation world to send people to support them. The Japanese cultivation world had a very subtle feeling about the Chinese cultivation world. Most of the monk soldiers of Shintoism and Pure Land True sect held a contemptuous attitude. The former was because although Shintoism itself was a native religion of Japan, for thousands of years, Chinese culture had spread to Japan. Shintoism combined Chinese Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism. It could be said that the three religions were combined into one, and combined with Japan's own characteristics, it formed a unique religion. Since the Ming dynasty, Japan had gradually sought to get rid of the influence of Chinese culture. After the Meiji Restoration, it had announced that it would leave Asia and enter Europe, completely disregarding China as its big brother. As a mainstream religion, Shintoism had set off a vigorous de-China movement. If they wanted to get rid of the cultural influence of a nation, they must first tamper with history and despise the other party. As for the monk soldiers of the Pure Land True sect, because of the many battles with the Chinese cultivation world in the past 100 years, they thought that most of the Chinese cultivators were cowards. When they went to the sect, basically all the top masters were in seclusion, and most of those who dared to challenge them could not defeat them. This made them develop a strong contempt for the dialogue. But at the same time, there were also a group of people in Shintoism and Buddhism who were close to and identified with China. This group of people came to China almost every year to find their roots and ancestors, to worship and burn incense. They thought that the Chinese and Japanese cultivation worlds were separated by a strip of water. No matter how deep the grudges were in the past, the cultures of the two countries were too close to be separated from each other. In particular, most of the Buddhist cultivators regarded China as the country where their Dharma originated, and most of them respected and affirmed the cultivation sects of Chinese Buddhism. Tachibana Wakako was a comprehensive product of Shintoism and Buddhism. She was a cultivator in Shintoism, but she grew up at the foot of Mount Koya. In the past, under the guidance of her master, she thought that there were no masters in the Chinese cultivation world, so she couldn't help but look down on them. However, after the Taoist assembly, Tachibana Wakako was scared to tears by Li Yundong's slap. After going back, she met her mother, Tsuruko Tachibana, who enlightened her. Only then did she respect the Chinese cultivation world. It turned out that there were experts in the Chinese cultivation world, and there was more than one. It turned out that not only was Li Yundong a great master, but Wang Yuanshan was also so strong in the past. Although Tachibana Wakako was young, she was considered precocious. She knew how heavy the burden on her shoulders was this time, so she didn't dare to neglect it. With awe and uneasiness in her heart, she set foot on the journey. In particular, after her mother, Masako Tachibana, was defeated by Li Yundong, she couldn't recover from the setback. She automatically gave up the position of the patriarch of the Tachibana family and returned the position to her mother, Tsuruko Tachibana. Tsuruko Tachibana was a typical pro-China party, so she naturally brought Tachibana Wakako, who she valued very much, to the pro-China party. But no matter how pro-China Tachibana Wakako was, she wouldn't show it too much, because Abe Nakian of the Abe family was with her. In terms of status, Abe Nakian was not inferior to her at all. In terms of age, he was older than her. Moreover, Japan had a social structure where men were superior to women. Women had a low status and were the vassals of men. Although the Tachibana family had always been famous for its strength in the cultivation world, Tachibana Wakako was young after all. After leaving the country, she subconsciously respected Abe Nakian everywhere and let him make the decision. She only followed closely beside him. Abe Nakian had just lost his father. If it were another young man, he would have been so decadent that he would have been crying all day long. However, his eyes were red all day long and his face was calm. His eyes were full of determination and hatred. He was not like Tachibana Wakako, who had come to China and seen the top masters in the Chinese cultivation world. She had even fought with the reincarnated Wisdom King and knew his power and horror. In Abe Nakian's view, the young man who was only a few years older than him might not be as powerful as the legend said. However, Issei Shunlight and Kaisai Hikariyoshi had repeatedly told him to invite Li Yundong, so he came doubtfully. This time, Abe Nakian and Tachibana Wakako went to China in a low-key manner. Both of them wore ordinary clothes. The man did not wear a robe with wide sleeves and a long skirt, nor did he wear a bone-like robe. The woman did not wear a beautiful kimono. The two of them looked no different from Chinese people. The cultivation world of Japan was very powerful. Before, many Japanese had come to Tiannan City to pay homage to the Desanxian. Naturally, it was impossible for them not to find out where Li Yundong was staying. After the two of them arrived at Tiannan City, it was still raining and thundering. Abe Naoko and Tachibana Wakako followed the map and found Li Yundong's home. After knocking on the door twice, someone quickly opened the door. Abe Nakian was a yin-yang master. He had opened the yin-yang eyes since he was a child. He was extremely sensitive to demons, ghosts, gods and demons. He could recognize the real body of demons and ghosts at a glance. At a glance, he saw that the person who opened the door was a fox. This time he was really angry from the bottom of his heart and he was full of courage. Abe Nakian's father had been killed by the mystical silver fox. He hated the house and the crow, so naturally he hated all the foxes. At this time he found a fox in Li Yundong's house. He was really like an enemy meeting. His eyes were extremely red and he was shocked and angry. He subconsciously cursed, "Fuck, give me your life." After that, he took out a 5-pointed star talisman and slapped it at Lingyu, who was opening the door. Lingyu was shocked and immediately screamed. As soon as she shouted, she quickly covered her mouth. At this time, the others in the living room also rushed out one after another, and without saying a word they went straight to Abe Nakian. Tachibana Wakako was even more shocked. She quickly grabbed Abe Nakian and shouted with all her might, "Mr. Nakian, calm down. They are Li Yundong's disciples." Although Abe Naoto was older than Tachibana Wakako, his cultivation was not as high as hers. When she stopped him he couldn't release the talisman. He just struggled like crazy, roared like a wild beast and shouted unpleasant words in his mouth. Fortunately, the foxes who rushed out at this time could not understand Japanese, so they did not know what he was saying. At this time Chao Yi, Lu Yuehong and the others were not there. Only Lin Miao was there. Lin Miao knew that he had only been in the door for a short time and had no right to speak, so he just stood by quietly. At this time the door suddenly opened. Ruan Hongling rushed out of the door, frowned and shouted in a low voice, "What's the noise? Don't you know that someone is going through thunder retribution?" Se Xinguang had calculated everything, but he had not expected that Li Yundong and the others were still going through thunder retribution at this time. People who had never gone through thunder retribution would naturally not know how important this period of time was for Chinese cultivators. In his opinion, although Abe Nakian might hate the fox around Li Yundong, he thought that Li Yundong was a broad-minded gentleman, and at the same time, a great cultivator with profound cultivation. Not only would he restrain his subordinates, but he also had enough ability to deter Abe Nakian. But what he didn't expect was that Li Yundong and Su Chan were having a great time transcending the thunder tribulation at this time. The two of them were thousands of miles away, leaving only Ro here, protected by the other members of the Fox Zen sect. Ziyuan, Zhou Qin, and the others were also going through thunder retribution. Could be said that they were racing against time. Their young spirits were fighting against the heavenly thunder, so how could they care about these things in the door? Ruan Hongling usually had a close relationship with the little foxes. As soon as she opened her mouth and shouted, the door immediately became quiet. Then both sides closed the door and a group of people blocked the staircase aisle, tightly packed. Ruan Hongling saw Tachibana Wakako and frowned. Her impression of Tachibana Wakako was still at the Taoist assembly. She shouted unhappily, "What are you doing here? Do you want to disturb my Shiji and Li Yundong's thunder retribution?" Since returning from the Taoist assembly, Tachibana Wakako had studied Chinese for a while under the influence of her mother. At this time it was not a problem for her to talk. She quickly pulled Abe, who was in a state of rage, forward, lowered her head and said respectfully, "We want to see Master Li Yundong." Ruan Hongling sneered and said, "What do you want to see him for? Do you want to cry?" Hearing her teasing, Tachibana Wakako blushed and said, "We have no malicious intentions this time. If you think that we came suddenly and were rude, please forgive us." As she said this, she knelt down gracefully. Chinese people thought that there was gold under their knees, so kneeling was a very big deal. However, the Japanese people's kneeling was just a common etiquette, and they knelt down as they pleased. The cultural difference between the two sides led to this kneeling. The expressions of Ruan Hongling and the hostile little foxes suddenly eased a lot. Ruan Hongling snorted and said in a softer tone, "You're good at talking. What do you want from Master Li Yundong?" Tachibana Wakako said respectfully, "We have something to say to your master face to face." Ruan Hongling frowned and said, "Didn't you hear what I just said? Is he going through thunder retribution now? Look at my lips, thunder retribution. Do you understand what it means to go through thunder retribution?" Tachibana Wakako raised her head anxiously and said, "But we really have something urgent to do." Before she could finish her words, Abe suddenly shouted and angrily spoke Japanese, "Wakako, get up. This Li Yundong is in cahoots with the fox. Even if he is invited, he must be a helper of the mystical silver fox. We are blind to look for him." Tachibana Wakako looked at him with embarrassment. She immediately wanted to beg again, but Ruan Hongling raised her eyebrows at this time, lowered her voice, gritted her teeth and said angrily, "What are you arguing about? Do you want to fight?" Well, come on little devil, how dare you be so arrogant here? Have you eaten arsenic? Are you tired of living? Abe could understand Chinese, but he could not speak it well. At this time, in a hurry, he naturally used his mother tongue. When he heard Ruan Hongling's words, he became more and more furious. If it weren't for Tachibana Wakako holding him tightly, he would have already fought. At this time, Tachibana Wakako couldn't help but pull him and say loudly, "Mr. Abe, you can't let yourself do it. Do you want to harm the entire Japanese cultivation world?" Abe felt as if he had been struck by lightning, and he suddenly froze on the spot. His eyes were red and he glared at Tachibana Wakako angrily. He gritted his teeth and said, "Tell them the words and see if they want to help." If they don't mean it, it's useless even if you kneel through the floor. Tachibana Wakako had no choice but to turn her head and tell Ruan Hongling what she had come for. Ruan Hongling and the little foxes next to her were all shocked. What? The mystical silver fox has been resurrected? As the little foxes of the Fox Zen sect, when they heard that the greatest figure in their sect had been resurrected, they naturally felt refreshed. They didn't think that it was a bad thing at all. They were all overjoyed, which only made Abe, who was next to them, even angrier. He sneered again and again. Only Ruan Hongling looked solemn. She asked in a deep voice, "Are you here to ask for help?" Tachibana Wakako prostrated herself on the ground and begged in a voice that was almost crying, "Yes, we have suffered heavy casualties now. Master Li Yundong, please help us for the sake of the fact that the cultivation world of China and Japan are separated by a strip of water." After she finished speaking, the little foxes next to her said sarcastically, "Humph, before you shouted to fight and kill, now that you are in trouble, you think of us? What have you been doing before?" Although this was what Ruan Hongling was thinking, she knew that she needed to take up the responsibility now, so she said seriously, "I understand what you mean, but I can't make the decision. Moreover, Li Yundong is indeed undergoing the tribulation in seclusion. Even if the sky falls down now, it's useless. We can only wait for his yang spirit to come back." Tachibana Wakako was greatly disappointed and looked at her with almost desperate eyes. At this time, Abe was even more furious and shouted angrily, "Tachibana Wakako, get up. Even if all of us are broken, we can't beg others like this." After that, he flicked his sleeves and left angrily. Tachibana Wakako had no choice but to stand up in panic. She bent down and bowed to Ruan Hongling, Lin Miao, and the little foxes. She said with tears in her eyes, "Please convey my message to Master Li Yundong. If he is willing to help, we will always remember his good deeds. Please." Chapter 840. Tachibana Wakako stood downstairs of Li Yunyang's house and cried silently. Abe Naoto, who was beside her, also calmed down at this time. He knew that he was young and impulsive, but he didn't think that his judgment was wrong. A person who was in cahoots with the fox spirit asked him to crusade against the mystical silver fox? Are you kidding me? Speaking of which, although the two wise men, Kaisai Hikariyoshi and Ise Kanemitsu, had predicted that there might be such trouble and had tried to help him, but at that time, Abe Naoto's mind was filled with anger and hatred, and he did not listen to what they said. Abe Naoto had messed up the matter. Although he was a little afraid and regretful, he still refused to admit his mistake. He just scolded Tachibana Wakako, "Don't cry. Let's go back. The Chinese cultivation world is full of cowards. They won't help us. In the world, only self-improvement and self-help is the right way." How could Tachibana Wakako believe his words? But she couldn't disobey him face to face, so she could only say, "But if we go back like this, we will be ashamed of the great trust of our predecessors." Abe Naoto was silent. After a long time he said, "Is there only one master in the Chinese cultivation world? This person is a little older than us, so he must be very strong. Why don't we go and ask the cultivators of other sects for help? What do you think?" This sentence suddenly woke Tachibana Wakako up. She suddenly thought, "Yes, didn't my mother say that there is a great master named Wang Yuanshan in the Chinese cultivation world? It should be possible to ask him to help, right? Moreover, for the sake of his mother, he should also lend a helping hand, right?" Thinking of this, Tachibana Wakako was overjoyed and said, "By the way, let's go to the Jingyi school and ask for help from Wang Yuanshan." Wang Yuanshan? Abe Naoto was a little confused. Who is this? Tachibana Wakako hadn't heard her mother talk about the relationship between Wang Yuanshan and Ao Wushuang, so at this time, she didn't tell Abe Naoto about the relationship between Wang Yuanshan and the fox spirit. She just told him that Wang Yuanshan had once defeated Tsuruko Tachibana, and Abe Naoto immediately let out a cry. Japan was a country that paid particular attention to the order of merit. There was an order of seniority between the young and the old. Abe Naoko himself was an outstanding young man. When someone like him heard that there was someone more outstanding than him, his first reaction was, "Impossible. How could he be so strong at such a young age?" But when Abe heard that Wang Yuanshan was of the same generation as Tsuruko Tachibana, he immediately became much more respectful. He was an old senior. When he heard that he had completely defeated Tsuruko Tachibana, he was immediately filled with respect. Tsuruko Tachibana was also a top master in the Japanese cultivation world back then. Did he know why she suddenly resigned from the position of patriarch and went into seclusion? Now Abe Naoko knew that she went into seclusion after being defeated by Wang Yuanshan. To be able to defeat Lord Tsuruko Tachibana at that time, he must be an earth-shattering expert. Abe immediately said, "Okay, then let's go find him." However, Tsuruko Tachibana refused to move and said solemnly, "Mr. Naoto, you have to promise me that you can't be impulsive anymore. Our personal honor is a small matter. The survival of the cultivation world is a big matter." Being taught a lesson by a girl who was several years older than him, Abe Naoto felt a little ashamed. He nodded solemnly and promised solemnly, "This time I won't fight back or scold back." After their discussion they quickly set off for Mount Longhu. After arriving at the foot of Mount Longhu, they met a Taoist priest who seemed to be wandering around but was actually patrolling. Tachibana Wakako respectfully told them about her intention to visit Wang Yuanshan. Several Taoist priests immediately looked at each other and said, "Wait here for a while." With that, the Taoist priest walked to a place not far away and picked up his mobile phone to report the situation here. After a while, a slim female Taoist priest came down with a foreigner with deep eyes and a high nose. Before she got close, the female Taoist priest shouted loudly. Before she arrived, her voice reached them first. "Eldest Shiji is in seclusion and so is eldest uncle. What's the matter?" This female Taoist priest was none other than Zhang Lufang. At this time she was the most idle person in the Jingyi school. When she heard that there was something going on, she jumped down. Naturally, Li Sun followed her like a shadow. When the patrolling Taoist priest saw Zhang Lufang, he pointed at Tachibana Wakako and Abe and said, "There are two Japanese. They said that they wanted to see Sherbo Wang. What should we do?" Zhang Lufang blinked and looked at Tachibana Wakako curiously. She quickly recognized her and said in surprise, "Oh, aren't you Tachibana Wakako? What are you doing here?" Mount Longhu was a famous mountain for thousands of years, and it was also the holy land of Taoism in China. Its reputation alone was above that of Xinyan Tantrism. Moreover, for thousands of years, many people had ascended to immortality from Mount Longhu, so it was naturally majestic and magnificent. Its majesty was naturally not something that a grassroots team like the Fox Zen School could compare with. Even the proud Abe did not dare to be presumptuous in front of Mount Longhu. He lowered his eyes and said nothing. Tachibana Wakako said respectfully, "We want to see Jinren Wang Yuanshan. We have something very important to report." Zhang Lufang giggled and said, "Sherbo Wang is probably going through the Thunder Retribution. I'm afraid you won't be able to see him." Tachibana Wakako's heart immediately sank to the bottom. "Ah. Is he also going through the Thunder Retribution?" Zhang Lufang looked at them strangely. "Is the Awakening Hibernation Festival now? Every minute and every second is as precious as gold. Why don't you hurry up and go through the Thunder Retribution?" Tachibana Wakako was almost desperate. She couldn't help but cry. "When will it end?" Zhang Lufang thought for a moment and said, "After the Awakening Hibernation Festival is the Spring Festival, and after the Spring Festival is the Qingming Festival and the Guyu Festival. At this time, it's not suitable to go through the Thunder Retribution. In this way there should be more than 10 days left." Tachibana Wakako felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She couldn't help exclaiming in despair, "More than 10 days?" Seeing her expression, Abe Naoto's heart sank. He asked, "Wakako, what's wrong? Don't you want us to see him?" At this time, Tachibana Wakako's heart really sank to the bottom. She bit her lips, tears streaming down her face, and nodded heavily. Abe Naoto couldn't help raising his eyebrows. He said to Zhang Lufang in a very stiff Chinese language, "We have a very important matter. We want to see Wang Yuanshan." Zhang Lufang also put her hands on her hips, imitated his tone, and said, "Sherbo Wang also has a very important matter. He can't see you." Abe Naoto was furious. He suddenly took a step back, took a deep breath, and roared loudly, "Wang Yuanshan, Wang Yuanshan." His cultivation was not low. As soon as he shouted, the mountains turned back, and his stiff voice could be heard everywhere. Zhang Lufang, a good-tempered person, couldn't help but frown and shout, "Hey, why don't you listen to me? I told you Sherbo Wang Heech." Before she could finish her words, she suddenly heard a magnetic voice next to her, saying gently, "Who's calling me?" Zhang Lufang was stunned. Then she turned around and saw a handsome man standing behind her. She didn't know when he had appeared here. She couldn't help but say in surprise, "Sherbo Wang? You're here?" Then she said with some embarrassment, "I'm sorry, Sherbo Wang. I disturbed you. I couldn't stop them." At this time, the two patrolling Taoist priests also came forward to greet Wang Yuanshan. Wang Yuanshan was easygoing. After returning the salute with a smile, he turned to Zhang Lufeng and waved his hand. Then he looked at Tachibana Wakako and said with a smile, "You are Tsuruko Tachibana's daughter?" Tachibana Wakako didn't expect that she would see Wang Yuanshan again when she was at the end of her rope. She was so excited that her face turned red. Yes, no. Tsuruko Tachibana is my daughter. Wang Yuanshan was stunned for a moment and then he sighed. It turns out to be her granddaughter. She looks so much like her. I thought she was a girl. Alas, time really flies, she already has a granddaughter. Then he sighed and said, "How is Tsuruko Tachibana now? Is she still fetching water?" The corners of Wang Yuanshan's mouth curled into a slight smile as he said this. It seemed that he was still a little proud of his prank back then. Tachibana Wakako quickly shook her head and said, "Thanks to you, she has now understood your teachings." She stopped fetching water and began to repair her 5 leaks. A strange light flashed in Wang Yuanshan's eyes. She understood it? She's not simple. Well, with her aptitude, if she can understand this, her future achievements will be limitless. Hearing his praise, Tachibana Wakako felt honored, and her face turned red with excitement. Wang Yuanshan's eyes soon fell on Abe Naomi again. His eyes were not sharp, but there was an invisible majesty in them. Moreover, in Abe Naomi's eyes, although this famous master was approachable, his whole body seemed to be integrated with heaven and earth, and his strength was unfathomable. Abe Naomi did not dare to be presumptuous. He stood respectfully and lowered his head to Wang Yuanshan's ear. "Please forgive me for offending you just now." Wang Yuanshan smiled and said, "What's your name?" Abe Naomi said, "My name is Abe Naomi and I'm the patriarch of the Abe family." Wang Yuanshan frowned slightly. "The patriarch of the Abe family?" Then his eyes flashed and his face froze. He also knew the Japanese cultivation world quite well. He knew that Abe Yuji should be in his prime, and it was impossible for him to die suddenly, or pass on the position of patriarch to such a young boy. He said in a deep voice, "Abe Yuji is dead? Who killed him?" Abe Naomi couldn't help kneeling down and crying, "It's the mystical silver fox." Zhang Lufeng and the 2 Taoist priests gasped in shock. Only Li Sun stood there in a daze. He didn't know who the mystical silver fox was. Wang Yuanshan's eyes became extremely complicated in an instant. He slowly looked back at the spirit mountain where he was, and then slowly looked in the direction of Tianan City. He slowly closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, they were full of calmness and detachment, as if he had seen through life and death. Wang Yuanshan smiled slightly and said, "I know why you are here. Are you here to ask for help?" At this time, Tachibana Wakako also knelt down with Abe Naomi and cried, "Yes, please forgive the past and help us." Wang Yuanshan smiled softly and said, "Get up. Even if you don't ask, I will go. This is an agreement that was made 10 years ago." Tachibana Wakako was at a loss, not knowing what his last sentence meant. She just stood up with Abe. Wang Yuanshan turned around and bowed slightly to Zhang Lufeng. He said, "Go and tell Zhang Kongyun that I'm going to fulfill the agreement. Please ask him to fulfill the agreement." After that, he flicked his sleeves and walked out of the mountain leisurely. Zhang Lufeng was confused and couldn't help shouting at Wang Yuanshan's back, "Hey, what agreement? My master is going through the thunder retribution. Uncle Wang, hey, Uncle Wang." But no matter how she shouted, Wang Yuanshan did not turn around. When he walked out of the range of the mountain, suddenly there was a loud sound in the sky, and a bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, causing the earth to tremble. Zhang Lufeng, Tachibana Wakako, and the others couldn't help raising their heads, but they suddenly saw 2 whirlpools appear in the clouds in the sky in an instant. They were like a pair of majestic eyes staring at Wang Yuanshan. Wherever he went, the 2 pairs of eyes followed him. Although Wang Yuanshan was walking, his speed was extremely fast. In a short while he was far away, and the rolling thunderclouds were also chasing after him, surging away. Chapter 841. Zhang Lufeng was tongue-tied as she watched Wang Yuanshan go away. She suddenly had a feeling that this Shu Wang, who had once been famous in the world, seemed to be gone forever. But this thought was only a moment, and something more important attracted her attention. The mystical silver fox had been resurrected. This was earth-shattering news. Zhang Lufeng watched Wang Yuanshan go away in a daze. Suddenly she was excited. This must be an earth-shattering battle. How can I miss such a good show? The eyes of this little Taoist nun who was afraid of the world being in chaos, were shining with excitement, But she didn't think about it at all. What if the mystical silver fox wins? She turned around excitedly and ran up the mountain. At this time, Zhang Ling and Zhang Kongyun had both chosen to cultivate in seclusion. Zhang Tianshi was busy crossing the Thunder Tribulation, so he did not participate in the battle to encircle the mystical silver fox. The only person she could share this news with was Zhang Tianhe. Zhang Lufang ran up the mountain like a wisp of smoke. Li Sun, who was behind her, couldn't keep up with her. He stumbled behind her and shouted. Zhang Lufang quickly ran toward the side peak where Wang Yuanshan was. Before she got close, she saw from a distance that the entrance of the mountain was already full of people. There were Taoist priests everywhere. These Taoist priests seemed to be sitting cross-legged in a scattered manner, but Zhang Lufang could tell at a glance that their positions were in line with the Ziwei Star Palace. They were stepping on the seven-star magic formation under their feet. There were horsetail whisks in front of them and swords on their backs. It seemed that everyone was meditating with their eyes closed. However, as soon as Zhang Lufang approached, everyone opened their eyes. Their eyes were like countless sharp swords, staring at Zhang Lufang in unison. They were full of murderous intent, and the swords behind them jumped out with a clang. In an instant, the brilliance shone in all directions, and the sword chi rushed into the sky. Zhang Lufang had no doubt that as long as she took another step forward, she would be pierced through by the sword. The power of the Dharma array lay in its ability to repeatedly stack the cultivation bases of many cultivators of average strength together, forming a geometrical change in power. Although it was limited by the shortcoming theory, if a large Dharma array could find many cultivators of similar cultivation bases who worked well together, the power of the Dharma array would be far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Wang Yuanshan was known as the best in the world, but even he had to admit defeat when he met the Shen-Tian sect's killing wolf extermination formation. He did not dare to enter the formation. It could be seen that there was a limit to one's strength. Even in the face of a formation, one had to admit defeat. However, the Dharma array was not something that just any sect could play with. First of all, the selection of the Dharma array was a huge challenge. Not only must everyone have the same intention, but their magic power and cultivation must also be of the same origin. Otherwise, if you went east and I went west, your cultivation would be rejected by me. How could you achieve the superposition of your magic power? Therefore, there were very few sects in the world that were qualified to play with the Dharma array. Only a few major cultivation sects such as Jingyi School could practice a Dharma array of such a scale. Zhang Lufang recognized at a glance that this Dharma array was the 7 stars array. It had the outer 7 stars and the inner 7 stars. The outer 7 stars consisted of 3 people. The 3 people formed a corner and formed the outer 7 stars. In the middle stood 7 Taoist priests with higher cultivation bases. They stood alone and formed the inner 7 stars. Compared to the Shen-Tian sect's killing wolf extermination formation, this Dharma array was not as powerful, but it was more flexible. It could be used to attack and defend. If someone wanted to break into the Dharma array from the outside, the Dharma array would be activated and the Dharma array would respond. The combination of the Dharma array and the Dharma array would be like the raging waves of the sea. Its power was infinite and it could grind people to death. If they wanted to take the initiative to attack, they could also rely on their proficient body techniques and cooperation. The inner formation would launch a surprise attack and the outer formation would contain them. The attacks were endless and extremely terrifying. Zhang Lufang saw that the 7 people in the inner formation were using the Big Dipper as a shield. The one standing in front was Zhang Tianhe, who was holding the Big Dipper sword. Zhang Tianhe stood in the position of the Dubhe star, which was known as the sole god of the sun. The sword chi all over his body was awe-inspiring. Zhang Lufang immediately stopped, waved at Zhang Tianhe and shouted, "Senior brother Tianhe, it's me. Can you let me come over?" Zhang Tianhe shook his head. Although his voice was calm, his tone was indescribably firm. "Junior sister, you should go back quickly. No one is allowed to come near here." Zhang Lufang asked curiously, "It's me. Can't I go too?" Zhang Tianhe said resolutely, "No one is allowed." Zhang Liufang's desire to share gossip with others was immediately dealt a blow. She looked resentful and disappointed as she looked at Zhang Tianhe. At that moment, Li Sun was out of breath and running over, covered in dirt from the fall. Zhang Lufang saw him and shouted angrily, "Let's go. Senior brother Tianhe has turned his back on us." After saying that, she walked down the mountain angrily. Li Sun was at a loss. He looked at Zhang Tianhe and the others who were in a tight formation and then looked at Zhang Lufang. In the end, he could only helplessly run down the mountain with her. At this moment, within the mountain cave behind Zhang Qianhe, every single talisman and rune hidden within the mountain cave glowed faintly. An indescribable force constantly flowed within the talisman and rune, like a myriad of rivers flowing along a river channel into a lake or ocean, ultimately forming into a terrifying tsunami. These forces slowly converged and fused, continuously climbing and extending towards the top of the magic circle. Finally, they converged at the entrance of a cave. An aura that was hard to be seen by the naked eye soared into the sky, supporting the two majestic thunderclouds in the sky to move towards the east. Zhang Lufang was still a young girl and she was lively and playful. She never kept her mouth shut, so she couldn't hide anything from Zhang Qianhe. She couldn't find Zhang Qianhe to share this matter with, so she could only sulk and stare blankly, as if something was stifling in her heart. But soon she suddenly remembered something. She quickly ran back to her residence, took out her mobile phone, and sent the news she knew to some of the Taoist friends of other sects with whom she had a good relationship. This time the news spread. In the information age there were no secrets that could be hidden. Suddenly the whole cultivation world knew that the mystical silver fox had appeared in Suyi. Almost all cultivators knew that Wang Yuanshan had gone to Japan. At this time, the whole cultivation world was in an uproar. However, at this time, Tachibana Wakako and Abe Naoko didn't know that after they invited Wang Yuanshan, they didn't think of going to other sects to invite others. In their opinion, the only thing they lacked was a top master like Wang Yuanshan. They didn't lack other low-level masters at all. Could even be said that they could find a lot of them. Logically speaking, the two of them should be happy that they had finally invited a top master, but in fact they were burning with anxiety. The reason was very simple, because Wang Yuanshan insisted on walking to Suyi. What a joke. Although Wang Yuanshan's one step was 10 steps for an ordinary person, he was still walking. How long would it take to walk to Japan like this? There was still the sea in the middle. But although Wang Yuanshan was amiable, he had a great bearing and a strong aura. Moreover, his reputation, age and experience were all there, so the two Japanese juniors did not dare to breathe too loudly. They were afraid that they would say something wrong and provoke this great master to turn against them. If that happened, they would be in big trouble. However, after walking with Wang Yuanshan for a day and a night, the two of them finally walked out of Jiangxi province and entered Zhejiang province. At this speed, they were afraid that they would have to cross the sea, enter Nagasaki, cross Oita, go through Kobe, go to Kyoto, and then pass through Nagano and Gunma counties before they could reach Izaki County. How long would it take for him to walk like this? This time, Tachibana Wakako and Abe were so anxious that they scratched their ears and cheeks, like ants on a hot pan. They wanted to urge him, but they didn't dare to. Along the way, the two of them were so anxious that they seemed to be acting in a pantomime. They winked at each other and urged each other to speak. Wang Yuanshan didn't seem to know anything. He just kept walking forward with his hands clasped behind his back. Far behind him was a thundercloud. This thundercloud had been left far behind by him. From his point of view, he could only see a dark cloud faintly following in the distant sky. It wasn't something that would surprise anyone. Wang Yuanshan himself knew that he couldn't fly to Suyi at once. First, it would consume a lot of spiritual energy. He had to save every bit of spiritual energy in Jinshi to entangle the mystical silver fox when he came. He didn't expect to be able to kill the mystical silver fox by himself. The only thing he had to do was to stall the mystical silver fox and wait for the arrival of the nine heavens' divine night thunder. If he flew too fast, the speed of the heavenly thunder would also increase greatly. When he flew to Suyi, the mystical silver fox would see such a big thundercloud following behind Wang Yuanshan. Would she run away? In those days, the mystical silver fox had been besieged and beaten by everyone. Even if she couldn't beat them, she would still run away. Would she foolishly wait for the nine heavens' divine night thunder to come and take her away now? Therefore he couldn't be fast even if he wanted to. However, he couldn't tell these words to these two Japanese friends. There was a saying in the Book of Changes, if the monarch is not secretive, he will lose his minister. If the minister is not secretive, he will lose his life. Therefore, a gentleman is cautious and does not come out. It means that if a person wants to achieve great things, he must first shut his mouth. Wang Yuanshan had cultivated for many years, and his bearing and self-restraint were first class. Naturally, he understood this truth. Tachibana Wakako and Abe followed behind Wang Yuanshan with sad faces. Finally, Tachibana Wakako couldn't help it. Relying on her young age, she pretended to be obedient and cute. She asked timidly, "Senior, when will we go like this? If we delay for one more minute now, it is very likely that the mystical silver fox will become stronger." Wang Yuanshan didn't stop. He turned his head and looked at her with a smile. He said, "Don't worry. No matter how strong she becomes, I have a way to deal with her." His words made Tachibana Wakako and Abe look at each other and calm down a little. But what they really wanted to say was, if we delay for one more minute, the Japanese cultivation world will suffer a greater loss. In fact, Abe even thought to himself, could it be that this great master wants to wait for the mystical silver fox to destroy our Japanese cultivation world and then take advantage of it? This sentence was a little selfish, but according to the entanglement of the cultivation world in China, it was not impossible. Wang Yuanshan also seemed to be aware of his thoughts. He turned his head and looked at him. His eyes were deep and penetrating. At once, Abe felt guilty and unconsciously lowered his head. Wang Yuanshan smiled slightly and said, "Don't look at the mystical silver fox. She is proud and arrogant. Since she let you call for help before, she won't make a move in advance. She will definitely wait for everyone to arrive before she makes a move." Abe boldly said, "But, Senior, if you hurry up, your chances of winning will be greater." Wang Yuanshan had a little entanglement with Tsuruko Tachibana back then. He couldn't speak Japanese, but he could understand some of it. He smiled and said, "You're wrong. If I'm slower, my chances of winning will be greater." Tachibana Wakako and Abe were shocked and asked in unison, "Why?" Wang Yuanshan smiled and said, "Because there are more reinforcements behind me." Tachibana Wakako and Abe looked at each other. They didn't know that the news of the mystical silver fox had quickly set off a wave in the Chinese cultivation world. Many sects had become active because of this. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.